What's up, Skiba News Nation? So this week we have a very special rerun style episode. We are enjoying wedding festivities with Jeremiah and Lynsi, soon to be Skibas, and it's going to be really fun. And so we're playing this episode so that we can have some time as friends and family, and so they can enjoy themselves. And so hope you guys enjoy this rerun from April last year. Really interesting enough, it has some recurring themes that are timeless that we hope you guys enjoy, as well as some clips that I'm going to put into this episode from the late Rob Skiba, breaking down some very juicy conspiracies. So Jeremiah also has a fantastic Manson Beatles correlation history segment in this episode. And if this doesn't demonstrate to you how our content seems to be, aging very well, you can go back and watch any of our old episodes. And even though some of the current news might not be current, we cover a lot of ongoing themes, and some of these things are topics that are even valuable today. So we hope you guys enjoy this special episode of Skiba News Nation. And one last big congratulations to the couple about to get married, my good buddy Jeremiah. I'm so excited for you guys. And you guys in the chat, give them we're stoked for y'all. Congratulations. Happy marriage, in the comment and chat. Leave it below for Jeremiah and Lynsi. And with that said, without further ado, here's an episode from last year covering Manson's and several other very juicy topics.
To submit a story, topic, or have any other inquiries, please email submit@skibanewsnation.com. Also, you can email Jeremiah Skiba personally at jeremiah@skibanewsnation.com. Also, email Jake personally at jake@skibanewsnation.com. If you want to write us a letter, send us something, help support us, or just say hi, please send your letter to Jeremiah Skiba, P.O. Box 560-271, The Colony, Texas 75056. If you write us a letter, I'll do my best to write you back. Hey, Skiba News Nation family, thank you for watching. Please like, share, subscribe, and click that notification bell so you never miss an episode of Skiba News Nation. If you want to help support us, please consider becoming a Patreon, where you will get exclusive content, shoutouts, and much more. And you can also support our channel by getting yourself some new Skiba News Nation merch. Thank you for coming on this journey with us as we continue to stay on the quest for truth. Huge shout out to all our Patreon supporters. Thank you so much for your support. We couldn't do this show without you. If you want to help support us, go to patreon.com/Skiba News Nation. Also, you can listen to Skiba News Nation podcasts on your favorite podcast platform.
What it costs. I want to know what the truth is. And I hope that people, my son, anybody, if my name comes up, whether you like me, whether you agree with me or not, at least you could respect the fact that he's on a quest for truth. He's on a quest for truth.
Welcome to Skiba News Nation, bringing you unfiltered views, news, interviews, discussions, and more. And now, here's your host, Jeremiah Skiba, award-winning musician and son of Rob Skiba.
Hey Skiba News Nation family, welcome to episode 43 of Skiba News Nation, your weekly source of the latest news, controversial topics, conspiracies, forgotten history, and much more. I'm your host, Jeremiah Skiba, and today we're going to be talking about God's Hebrew calendar, prophetic signs of President Trump, Joe Rogan interviews Trump generated by AI, Pfizer documents expose how dark Big Pharma truly is. Tell your friends chemtrails are real. We have the proof. BRICS nations plan joint currency backed by gold. Bud Light salesman claims nobody wants to buy their products anymore. An all-new Opa's Corner, and for history, we're going to be talking about the true story of Charles Manson. And was Charles Manson a Beach Boy? memes, and much more, so stay tuned. As always, I'd like to introduce my great and insightful co-host, Jake Grant. Welcome, Jake. How are you?
I'm doing great. We just had 10 puppies. My Great Dane Doberman mix had a awesome litter yesterday. My first time having puppies since I was like a kid, I think. So I'm like a kid in a puppy shop, right? You can call me the Doug Father, right? I'm so excited. My daughters are going to have a blast having these puppies at our house for the next couple weeks. So
awesome.
Pretty excited about that. And we just got done with the Passover feast season, and that was a blast too, getting to camp out and hang out with a bunch of people and lots of food and dancing and singing. And that was a blast as well.
Sounds fun. All right, well, I know we got a great show today. You ready to dive right in?
Let's do it.
Let's dive right in.
Alrighty, to start us off this week, I wanted to share some really interesting pictures, some concepts that I think are fascinating. This says, "Bring back the front porch." And it was from author Philip Gulley from Porch Talk. And it says, "I believe all that is wrong with the world can be attributed to the shortage of front porches and the talks we had on them. Somewhere around the 1950s, builders left off the front porch to save money, and we've had nothing but problems ever since." And just to break this down for you guys, now we live in a patio society where everyone's kind of hidden and nestled away back behind their house, kind of keeping to themselves, leaving behind the society of the 1950s where everybody would sit on their front porch and face out into the world, you know, metaphorically facing the world's problems, facing their neighbors, facing the world out there. And instead we've kind of transitioned to patio culture, right, where everybody's hiding in their backyard. Nobody wants to talk to one another. Nobody wants to interact. Nobody has their eyes set forward on the problems that the world is presenting before us. Instead, we're focused on looking back into our backyard, or looking on, in the material sense, looking on only the things we own, and not out into the world and interacting with our neighbors is one big thing I think could be affected by this concept. And it's just interesting. I think it's funny. Maybe not all of the world's issues, but this theory that because we don't sit on our front porch anymore and get to know the world out there and have those long, deep conversations and discussions that the people back in the 1950s have, perhaps does contribute some to our issues in today's society.
Maybe. I miss the front porch.
And another one, since we're kind of having a nostalgic throwback, 100 years ago, this is what a father would say to a son: "You are going to be a farmer too." And the son would say, "Okay, Dad." Nowadays, this is what a father says to a son: "I didn't give you any valuable skills or inheritance for your future, but you can always get a $100,000 unforgivable loan to be educated on your passions that I did nothing to encourage in you as a child. So go ahead and become a debt slave to the system." I mean, this is the model, guys. This is how our society kind of has been set up. And I really lean heavily towards family units building together. I think we're all convinced once we turn 18 by our culture today that you need to move away from home, build your own empire, work really hard so you can have your own house and your own car and support your own family, which is in a way honorable, right? It puffs up your self-pride because you've made it on your own. But at the same time, it's a conspiracy to weaken the family unit. And I'm more fond of kind of the Filipino or South American mindset where people grow together as a family, and you have the older generation, the grandparents, being able to stay at home and sow wisdom into their children and to their grandkids, and be able to watch them, school them, the family all contributing to you know, the wisdom and the schooling of the kids, while the parents can go out and work and everybody supports each other. But the problem is everybody gets their toes stepped on. Nobody wants to live near somebody that can actually call them into check. You know, everybody has to have their own, you know, little private thing, because if you live with other people, sometimes you can bump each other the wrong way. But at the same time, you know, I think it's a conspiracy to weaken the American family so that we can't progress. We can't build these mighty empires of families that can take over society and do really prosperous things, because we're all struggling on our own. And that meme was pretty good. But however, just remember, just because you're struggling does not mean you're failing. A lot of people have different scenarios and situations that they fall into, and so it's important to remind yourself you're doing the best you can. And if you're not doing the best you can, pick yourself back up. And despite all the crazy things in the world, we have to be prosperous. And when we're in this crazy world of agendas and indoctrination and all the things that are levied against us, whether it be attacks on our health, attacks on our identity, attacks on our culture, attacks on our faith, we have to still prosper in the hardship. You know, let's be that flower that grows through the cracks. You know, you got a tree that can be planted in some cement, and it will crush that cement if given enough time. So something interesting today, we're going to be going through some conspirafact that is going to be brought to light, that some of you, if you're new to some of this stuff, you might be mind blown to hear some of these reports we have for you today. But the mainstream media and the things that we're presented by modern indoctrination, you know, the tell lie vision is lying to us, right? This meme is great in summing up what we're dealing with in terms of searching for truth in today's world. Scientific fact: a dog gets more factual information from sniffing another dog's butt than a human does from watching mainstream media. Oh man. So today we're talking about truth, honesty, not having guile, right? And I wanted to share a couple verses before we get into our news story. The term guile is found in our scriptures, and of course, to break down what it means, it is speaking unabashed truth without an agenda, not being ashamed of who you are, not being ashamed of what consists of the things that you are speaking to somebody, because you're not trying to manipulate them. So you just tell them like it is, right? And yeah, Psalm 32, blessed is the man unto whom the Lord imputeth not iniquity, and in whose spirit there is no guile. Psalm 34, right? Keep thy tongue from evil and thy lips from speaking guile, right? And this is significant, really, in terms of our faith walk as Bible believers, right? We have our example of the Messiah, right? 1 Peter 2:22, talking about Christ, right? For even hereunto were ye called, because Christ also suffered for us, leaving us an example that ye should follow his steps. What did he do? He did no sin. You know, he kept the Torah of his Father, right? Walked out his righteousness, and neither was found guile in his mouth, right? So guile is this agenda-laced way of speaking to people where you're trying to manipulate them. And we see that all over the place in today's world. And, you know, a reminder of whenever you start to walk in this type of thing, whenever you start to walk in truth, unrelenting pursuit of the truth, right? Mm-hmm. You're going to be reviled, which just like Christ was, who, when he was reviled not again. And when he suffered, he threatened not, but committed himself to him that judgeth righteously, right? The Father in heaven. And so as we walk unrelentingly after truth, as we take guile and agendas out of our mouth and just speak the truth, because the truth sets people free, right? Mm-hmm. Then you have to be prepared to be reviled. But hey, don't hold it against them. whenever somebody's really warm in a nice blanket, I remember when I was a kid and I was sleeping in before school, I was all warm and toasty, and my parents would come to wake me up with the truth of the fact that the bus was there and it was time to go. It was uncomfortable, you know? I don't want to get out of my warm, cozy blanket. But the truth, using this analogy of, hey, the bus is here, wake up, or you're going to be late, you're going to miss school, right? I don't want to hear that truth. I'm warm and cozy. Even though they are there to serve, even though my parents were there to love by helping wake me up, even though I had to forsake that comfortable feeling, the truth would then, you know, be applied, and I'd be like, oh, I'm late, I gotta get up, I gotta get ready, I gotta go. And so in the same way, we're trying to wake up people that have wrapped themselves in deceptions, wrapped themselves in believing lies that the mainstream media or the powers that be, right, the big vague they in the sky, right, who are perpetrating all these things, they wrap themselves in these deceptions because it's warm and comfortable to believe that the world is all right. But the truth of the matter is, there are agendas levied against you, your soul, your family, your mind, your health, and we're here to expose those, right, Jeremiah?
Yep. Yes, sir.
Yeah. One last thing on that topic of guile. It is interesting that one of the qualities of the 144,000 talked about in the book of Revelation, you know, whoever these chosen, set apart, numbered 12,000 from each of the tribes are, you know, one of their qualities is that they had no guile in their mouth, just like the Messiah had no guile in his mouth. And you know, it's a part of being set apart. It's a part of being a rare and unique individual that stands on truth in today's world, to not have the agenda in your mouth. So when we speak truth, that's what we should be doing. Let me see here. Today, everyone is so busy being offended that no time is left to repent from sin, and the meek shall inherit the earth, not the offended. So if you are on the other side of some of these stories, some of these topics that we talk about that are hard-hitting, that challenge preconceived notions, don't be so offended, right? And what is a meek person? There's somebody who's willing to double check themselves. There's somebody who's willing to say, I might have got it wrong, but I don't want to keep being wrong, right? And that's how the meek inherit the earth, not those that are offended. And we are so in political correct culture today, and cancel culture, and just the woke agenda, the false wokeism of the left, right? That if you offend somebody, they just, oh, their egos, guys, they refuse to be the meek. They refuse to take a second and think, hold on, the mindset that I'm buying and the agenda that I'm pushing and that I'm so feverishly passionate about, yeah, am I right or wrong? Have I bought into a lie? Have I bought into a deception that I am now perpetrating, right? All right, so these are some of the main concepts for today's video that I find interesting. Now, check out the first couple minutes of this this topic surrounding Donald Trump and his arrest. It parallels with some biblical themes, and it kind of makes me raise an eyebrow. Very interesting, the timing of all of this. So check out this first video.
If you've read the Divine Code, you know that patterns follow certain people's lives. Like Donald Trump, for instance, was born on a blood moon and very significantly tied to the nation of Israel. Well, something else that's really significant that I think you're not going to hear on the news, but it makes heaven's news, is that Trump has just been arraigned in New York City on exactly the eve of Passover. On the Hebrew calendar, that's Nisan 13. Now, you might say, well, what's the big deal about that? And again, if you haven't studied the Hebrew calendar, you might not realize that there's another calendar that's running that is not, you know, the Western Gregorian calendar. And a lot of times significant events, prophetic events, happen on that calendar. So What is the significance of Nisan 13? We have at least two meanings. Number one, the day that Trump faced his charges was the same day that Jesus Christ faced his charges. They were trumped up charges. Pardon the pun, but they were trumped up charges when Jesus stood in front of the Sanhedrin and Pilate and all of these six unjust trials that he went through, starting on 13 Nisan. That's exactly the day that Trump appeared in New York to face his charges. It's also the day that Haman issued the decree with, unbeknownst to the king, how this would affect his queen, Esther, but it's recorded in Esther 3, that Haman issued a decree so that all the provinces of Persia, in fact, let me show it to you. In Esther chapter 3, he says, in verse 12, then the king's scribes were summoned on the 13th day of the first month. That's the 13th of Nisan. An edict, according to all that Haman commanded, was written to the king's satraps and governors over all the provinces. What was it about? Verse 13, letters were sent by couriers to all the king's provinces with instruction to destroy, to kill, and to annihilate all Jews, young and old, women and children, in one day. This was 13 Nisan. And this is the same day Jesus was falsely accused. And this is the same day that Trump is being falsely accused. What is he guilty of? He's guilty of winning the 2016 election. And he's going to be guilty in the eyes of permanent Washington of winning the 2024 election. They're so deathly afraid of this that they won't let the democratic process run out and run itself and let people choose. They want to choose for you. So this is very amazing how Trump is connected to Jesus's trials. And there's more than this. They both face false charges on the same day. Then the next day is Passover. That's when Jesus was crucified, falsely, charged, unjustly tried, and then unjustly sentenced to death.
Wow.
So very, very, very interesting, Jeremiah. I don't know if you caught that, but they lined up the indictment of Trump, the accusations coming against him, right along the same time frame as the Messiah, right? And man, isn't that interesting? And there are so many qualities of Trump throughout the years that seem being linked to very strong biblical themes, such as he transferred the embassy to Jerusalem. He was hailed as the new King Cyrus by the Israelis, right? They put him on a literal coin, right, with his head. And he was instrumentally involved with the Abraham peace accords, right? And of course we have this this pastor here who's like really very directly kind of bringing up, like, if you see the pattern throughout history in the scriptures, these individuals who have been falsely accused on this date seem to arise as some type of savior, right? You see kind of what he was getting at, like,
yeah,
Queen Esther was accused on Nisan 14. You had Christ accused falsely, and and then of course you have Donald Trump, leaders who have had political opponents arrested. You have Stalin, you have Hitler, you have Mao, you have Biden. So I thought that was interesting. But whenever I see an individual propped up on the scene, as a savior, my Bible prophecy eyebrows start raising. You know what I mean? And it's super interesting that these things are lining up on the prophetic calendar. So I just wanted to bring that out in terms of, I'm starting to think that in 2024 Trump is going to be a shoo-in. You know what I mean? I think he's going to win. Yeah,
they made him more popular than ever. I mean, he's going to be a symbol. I heard somebody say that he's going to be on posters in every college student's dorm room as a political prisoner. I mean, there's so many things that district attorney, he could be prosecuting like real criminals, but he's not. He's wasting taxpayer money on trying to get Trump, who didn't do anything wrong. The statute of limitations is over, but I'll stop rambling about that.
Yeah. I mean, it's so interesting, the timing of all that. I think it was definitely a big spoofed up distraction from other topics, because we all know that I don't think they're going to be able to peg him with anything, and I think it helped him more than anything. I just share the parallels with the biblical prophecy topics because of verses like Matthew 24:24. For those of you guys who are interested, and it's also, interesting to look into, because, he really is becoming the savior of modern conservative America, and so,
well, I mean,
anyways,
who else?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's the mindset that a lot of Christians, conservatives have today, is who else is vocalizing their beliefs? Who else is vocalizing, a challenge to the swamp and the system? And, personally, my political leanings, Jeremiah, I'm like, hey, don't get swept away in celebration of a man. The political system's rigged, in my opinion. But I can see when all of these different pastors, guys like I shared that video of, are propping up individuals. It really, you can see how so many people are starting to see Trump as that figure.
Mm-hmm.
So
we're going to pick up where we left off, and with chapter 3 of my book called "The First Shall Be Last." And really, that sort of got started as a result of looking at Amos 3:7, where God says that he's not going to do anything without telling his prophets first what he's going to do. So when we think about the last days, we see descriptions of the last days like this. It's going to be a time that has never been like it and never will be again. It's going to be one of the most significant times in all of human history. Never been anything like it. So I started to think about that. I'm going, okay, he tells us first that he's not going to do anything except he tells us first what he's going to do. And we keep seeing these references to the last days being so significant that there's never been a time like it. So with that being the case, do you really think he's going to leave us hanging concerning the details of the last days? Or is he going to tell us everything we need to know? Well, I come from the position that I believe he's going to tell us everything we need to know, and that he did tell us everything we need to know, including the identity of the Antichrist by name in the scriptures. And so we'll start with that. I believe that the scriptures beginning in Micah chapter 5, Matthew 24, Revelation 9, Revelation 13, and Revelation 17 tell you exactly, in a tremendous amount of detail, who the Antichrist is. But rather than going in the order I just listed, I'm going to work my way backward because it's easier to describe it this way. So let's start with Revelation 17. Identifying the beast of Revelation. The beast that thou sawest, we all understand the beast is the Antichrist, right? Before we get started, everybody agree? The beast is the Antichrist? The Antichrist is the beast? Okay. The beast that thou sawest was and is not and shall ascend out of the bottomless pit. Where does the beast come from? Open book test, right? Remember in school we used to have like geography open book test. Go, find the United States of America. And there's a map that says United States of America. Right here. Open book test. Where is he coming from? So he's not coming from Kenya? He's not coming from Hawaii? Says he's coming from the bottomless pit. Now, I've been a student of eschatology most of my adult life, and I've heard all kinds of things. Seems like every other president we have is a candidate for the Antichrist. Henry Kissinger is a candidate for the Antichrist. Ahmadinejad's a candidate for the Antichrist. There's the Mahdi. There's always somebody walking around the earth that, his name adds up to 666, so he's got to be it, right? It says the beast comes from the bottomless pit. So that's where I'm going to look for the beast. And he'll go into perdition. And they that dwell on the earth shall wonder, whose names were not written in the book of life from the foundation of the world. Stop. What happens to your name if you do not accept Yeshua as your Savior? What happens to it's blotted out. of the book of life. That says to me it had to be there to begin with. How can you blot something out unless it was already there? It's my opinion that all of our names are written in the book of life from the foundation of the world, but we have to accept our reservation that was paid for us at the cross. If we don't, then our name gets blotted out. He paid the price. You know, when I was asked to come speak up here, somebody paid for our hotel room. All I had to do was walk up to the desk and tell them my name, and they said, yep, here's your key. Somebody paid for my reservation before I got here. All I had to do is confirm it. I believe it's the same way. When we accept Yeshua's sacrifice, the payment that he made for our admittance, if you will, into the kingdom, then great. But if you say, no, sorry, you know, thanks for paying for my hotel, but I don't want it. And they're like, wow, you know, we paid for everything for you. We did everything we could to get you here. Man, I'm sorry. Depart from me. You know, so who are these people whose names were never written then from the foundation of the world? It is my opinion, based on the research of Genesis chapter 6, that these are people who are never meant to exist in the first place. These may be hybrids, abominations. If you look at the hybrids that were created in Genesis chapter 6, you saw that they were destined to utter destruction. Throughout the Torah, we read this. The Amorites, the Hittites, the Jebusites, etc., etc., etc. Every time we encounter them, you see the words utterly destroy. And this is one of the things that trips up many people who don't understand what's going on in Genesis 6, and why many people become agnostics and atheists, because they can't accept this God of the Old Testament. Remember I said yesterday, many agnostics and atheists actually know the Bible better than we do? Yeah, because they read those things, they didn't understand what was going on, and they threw the book aside and said, this is crazy, this God is a genocidal maniac. Why would I want anything to do with him? Until you understand that he was wiping out abominations, and it was an act of love to preserve his good creation from the evils of the bad creations. And Yeshua said in Matthew 24:37, as it was in the days of Noah, so shall it be at the coming of the Son of Man. Which means, if I take that literally, the last days are going to mirror the days of Noah. And if you keep reading, like in Luke, I believe it's 21, where he's talking, he says, except those days be shortened, no flesh would be saved. Something's going to happen, and it's going to be really bad, to the point where God's going to have to wipe the whole world out again, this time with fire, because of a repeat of what happened in Genesis chapter 6. What has been will be again, Solomon said in Ecclesiastes 1:9, right? So it is my opinion that these are probably hybrids. When they behold the beast that was and is not and yet is. There's an interesting phrase right there. How is Yeshua referred to in the beginning of Revelation? The one who what? Was and... So the one who was and is to come. So this one's called the one who was and is not and yet is. Huh. Interesting. And here is the mind which hath wisdom. The 7 heads of the beast, remember the beast has 7 heads, right? Are 7 mountains on which the woman sitteth. A lot of people will stop there and say, see, it's the Vatican. Or they'll go off into 7 kingdoms, talking about kingdoms. Well, next sentence says there are 7 kings. Not talking about kingdoms there. Now, true, kings rule over kingdoms. That's true. But he's telling us to focus on individual people, not on kingdoms, though they may rule them. There are 7 kings. 5 of these individuals have fallen. 1 is, and the other is not yet come. And when he cometh, he must continue a short space. And the beast that was and is not, even he is the 8th, and is of the 7, and goeth into perdition. There's a ton of detail given in those few verses right there. So let's just go with the text here. It says we got 5 have fallen, 1 is, and 1 is yet to come. Okay. First thing we need to address again is that the word that was used there is kings. The Greek word is basileus. Strong's Concordance number 935, defined as a king, a ruler, an emperor. John did not use the closely related word basileia, Strong's Concordance number 932, which means kingship, sovereignty, rule over kingdom, etc. So all these teachers are out there saying it's seven kingdoms. That's not what the text says in English nor in Greek. It's talking about individuals we need to be looking at. So the 5 had fallen. Now, when I first started going down this line of thought, I had read a book by a guy named Peter Goodgame, who wrote a book called The Giza Discovery. That's online for free. You can, I think it's thegizadiscovery.com or redmoonrising.com, I think is his website. Anyway, if you could just Google The Giza Discovery by Peter Goodgame. He was going down this same line of thought and put together a list of the people that he thought fit for the list of the 5 have fallen, 1 now is, and 1 is to come. And his list was based on, okay, if we know we're talking about the beast, we know we're talking about the Antichrist, let's look for people in the biblical account and in history who fit Antichrist-like characteristics. We know what the Antichrist is going to do and some of his characteristics. So let's see how many people we could find that fit the bill, basically. And this was the list that he came up with. And as I did my own research, and again, I consider myself to be a researcher. By that I mean I research what has been searched by others before me. I don't take anything, and I don't want you to take anything that I say any more than I take anything somebody else says just as gospel truth. Take it, absorb it, write notes down, and go search it out for yourself, pray, and let the Holy Spirit be your teacher, not me or anybody else. So when I hear somebody give something that just kind of really resonates with me, I'm like, cool, okay, that's interesting. I'm going to go look it up and go search for myself. I found that I agreed with the list that he came up with a few exceptions that we'll cover. Number 1, Nimrod. He's the first king in the Bible, in the post-flood world, certainly. He's tried to create a one-world system without God. In fact, his goal was to kill God. That sounds a lot like the Antichrist. Look at what he's trying to do, New World Order. He's going to make war with the one coming on the horse. We know that's Yeshua, so certainly fits. Pharaoh of Egypt at the time of the Exodus. This is something I recently stumbled across. There was a teaching done by Chuck Missler based on Isaiah 52:4, if I remember the address right. And he was basically saying that there's a very good likelihood, based on the wording of the text, that the Pharaoh at the time of the Exodus was an Assyrian. And what I find interesting about that is, if you look at the timeline, a lot of people will say that the Jews were slaves in Egypt for how many years? That's what everybody says, right? So Paul said, he set the guardrails up. Paul said from the giving of the covenant of Abraham until the giving of the Torah is 430 years. Nobody's in Egypt for 400 years during those guardrails. From the time of Abraham until Joseph is sold into slavery, other than a few trips there and back, but nobody's like spending time there, and certainly nobody's enslaved in Egypt for 400 years. From Abraham to Joseph is 215 years. So nobody's even in Egypt for 215 years. Then what happens? Joseph, he goes to prison, but he gets out, right? What happens next? Joseph is what? Made second in command of all of Egypt. So he's next to the Pharaoh. He's the guy, right? So, go a little bit forward from 215, and he's made, the second in command. And then the house of Jacob comes down, right, from Canaan. And then what happens then? Where do they go? Goshen. They're given like the best of the land of Egypt, and they're living like regional governors and princes in the land of Egypt. So now you're extending the timeline even further. Nobody's a slave yet. Best I can figure, they probably went into slavery right about the time of Moses' birth or very shortly before that. So 80 to 100 years max is all you can fit in the 430-year guardrail when you realize nobody's there until 215 and you progress that forward. So then a Pharaoh shows up that didn't remember Joseph. Well, how could that be if he was an Egyptian? National leaders, it's a good idea. You need to know your own history of the nation you're going to rule, right? Especially if you're coming of the people, for the people, by the people type of scenario, right? So if it's an Egyptian rising up through the ranks to become the next Pharaoh, he obviously would know about the other pharaohs in the history and Joseph, because it's not that far. I mean, we're talking maybe 100 years from the death of Joseph to the time that Moses is born. So Chuck Missler is talking about how, I think it says another Pharaoh, or whatever the word is used that precedes the Pharaoh, indicating a different person. He said the word is heteros, meaning of a different kind. A person of a different kind arose in the land of Egypt and became the Pharaoh and didn't know anything about Joseph. And so he put him into slavery. Now, Isaiah 52:4 says, "And thus saith the Lord God, my people went down afore into Egypt to sojourn there, and the Assyrian oppressed them without cause." And so he's got a whole teaching on that. I had never heard that before, but I'm like, well, that's absolutely fascinating, because one of the titles for the Antichrist is the Assyrian. We see that in Micah chapter 5 and elsewhere. There's a number of places it talks about the end-time tyrant as an Assyrian. So, and this guy, the pharaohs, of course, thought themselves to be a god, and they tried to wipe out God's people. right? So he's a good fit, definitely a good candidate for number 2. Number 3, Sennacherib, another Assyrian. Again, thinks himself a god, tries to wipe out God's people. Anybody know what happened to his army? Angel of the Lord came down and wiped out. It was 180,000 or something like that. I forget what the number was, but pretty much the whole army. And then he went home and his sons killed him. But, you know, if you think of Antichrist characteristics, he's a good fit. The king of Tyre, if you read about the description of the king of Tyre, it starts off describing him as a man, and all of a sudden the narrative kind of switches and starts talking about Lucifer, Satan. So clearly this guy had some kind of affiliation or likeness of the fallen one for that description to have been given. Now, Antiochus Epiphanes is not in our canonized text, although it depends on who you're talking about. If you're talking about the church that still has the Maccabees in their Bible, then it is canonized. Regardless, he's in my current 66-book canon of Scripture. He's in the intertestament period. Those who still have the Apocrypha in their Bibles, it's part of their Bible. You know, he came in there and, you know, was killing people. Like, you better eat this pig or you die. You know, so start eating pork or you're dead. Set up the statue of Zeus and offered up a pig in the temple, right? And Maccabees, I think it's 1 Maccabees 4, if I remember right, called that act the abomination of desolation. They defined the abomination of desolation as bringing a pig into the temple. And Sheila said, my wife said, wow, if the abomination of desolation was the bringing of a pig into the temple, what are we now? This is the temple of the Holy Spirit. The abomination of desolation, defined as the abomination of desolation, was bringing a pig into the temple. Food for thought. Pardon the pun. Yeah. You know, something to think about. But, I mean, if you look at what he did, he's definitely a good candidate for an Antichrist character. And I would suggest Alexander the Great may be another possible candidate. So I would take number 5 as interchangeable with either of those two guys as possibilities. Alexander the Great, of course, is in the canonized text of the 66-book canon. And he's described as what? What's the symbol used for him? Yeah, the he-goat. Yes, he's described as a he-goat, and he has a horn between his eyes. And it says the horn is the first king. Well, the first king of the Bible is Nimrod. So it appears, at least as I look at that, that Alexander the Great did whatever he did, at least in the likeness and the spirit of Nimrod. So he's a candidate, in my opinion. The one that now is, well, that depends on when you think is. Like Clinton said, right? Well, what's the definition of is? Well, it depends on when you think John wrote the book of Revelation. If it's an earlier writing or a later writing. You know, I've heard good arguments on both sides. I tend to lean more towards the 90 AD viewpoint, but I've heard good arguments for the earlier, pre-destruction of the temple argument. Either way, you got two Caesars to choose from, Nero or Domitian. Neither one of these were good guys. You know, I suspect Nero was probably worse than Domitian, but, you know, he had a burning candlelit dinners to the burning Christians and things like that. But, you know, the Caesars thought themselves to be gods, and they certainly persecuted God's people. So either one, again, would be a good candidate, in my opinion, for the one that is at the time when John wrote those words. Now, the one that will come and his reign will be short, I think a reasonable case could be made for Adolf Hitler. Somebody in John's future, come, reign for a short period of time, and he's done. I think people who lived during World War II, during the reign of Hitler, probably, I would think the most eschatology teachers at that time were probably looking at this guy saying, we're here. I know that if I was living in those days and knowing what was going on, I would have been having my eye on him for sure. So if this is a reasonable list, then let's continue with the descriptions given in the scriptures. We see that this individual has a deadly head wound, right? And I saw one of the heads, as it were, wounded to death, and his deadly wound was healed, and all the world wondered after the beast. And, you know, a lot of people are saying it's Obama right now. And I will admit there is a lot of weirdness surrounding this guy. And I'll talk about him a little bit more as we get further in this presentation. I personally do not obviously believe that he is the Antichrist. I think he may be an Antichrist. There are many Antichrists, but there is the Antichrist beast that we're trying to nail down here. In my personal opinion, is he's probably playing the role of a John the Baptist type character, like others before him, preparing the way for what's to come. But, I joke about it, but I'm kind of serious. I don't really think the Antichrist is going to need a teleprompter to address sixth graders. And they worshipped the dragon, which gave power unto the beast, and they worshipped the beast, saying, "Who is like unto the beast? Who is able to make war with him?" I just can't see that applying to a dude that needs a teleprompter to read in front of sixth graders to give a speech. He doesn't impress me, put it that way. But if we look at the list, looking for somebody who has a deadly head wound, well, Nimrod, in numerous accounts of this character, he became known by many names. We talked about last night how at the Tower of Babel, everybody was under his leadership, all gathered together, and then the confounding of the languages. They went out to 70 different languages, 70 different people groups, went their different ways, talking about the same guy, now with different languages. So he took on different names. All right. But in the various stories of some of these names that he became known by, you'll see that he was chopped up. Osiris was chopped up into 14 pieces, only 13 of which were found. In numerous cases, you see the mutilation of this individual. The book of Joshua tells you that Esau cut off Nimrod's head. Esau was known as a mighty hunter, right? His dad loved him because he could bring home the venison, right? Remember the whole deal where Jacob fooled his dad, the whole deal with that. He was a good hunter. He was a teenager. He's about 15 years of age, I believe, 13 or 15, I forget, but I think he's 15. According to the Joshua account, he was out hunting. Nimrod's pushing about 200 and change, 230, 215, something like that, years of age. He was known as a mighty hunter. He's out there, 2 alpha dogs in the same field. Esau waits in ambush and at the opportune time rushes out and cuts off Nimrod's head and kills his other 2 buddies that were with him. Meanwhile, Nimrod had a team of other people who were further away that heard the commotion, and they came running to see what was going on, found the dead body, and wanted to know who killed Nimrod, their king. Meanwhile, Esau had taken the coats that Nimrod wore that, according to Hebraic legend, were the original skins that God clothed Adam and Eve with, that were preserved on the ark and later went through Ham to Nimrod, according to the text. I think that that's where legends, like in the Greek mythology of the Golden Fleece, some of these stories find their origin in possibly a real event like that. So Esau takes off running. Where does he go? He goes home. He's starving after the battle, and this mighty hunter sells his birthright for a bowl of beans? When we read Genesis, that doesn't make any sense at all. This mighty hunter comes in, sells his birthright for a bowl of beans? What? But when you realize the subtext of what's going on from the elaborated story that we get in Joshua, well, it makes perfect sense. This guy's running for his life from Nimrod's buddies because he just killed the emperor of the world. He's like, what do I care about my birthright for? I'm a dead man anyway. Just give me something to eat. Well, all of a sudden that story makes a whole lot more sense. Right? So, according to the Hebraic text, he was killed by Esau. Now, there are rabbinic legends that say that Nimrod was killed by Chem. There's a number of possibilities of what could have happened there. I basically think that what happened after Esau killed him is that Chem chopped him up into the remaining pieces that we hear about in the Osiris legend, and the pieces were mailed out to people just same way, what's it, the prostitute, I think, in the book of Judges, I think, where she was chopped up and they mailed the pieces to people. They're making a statement, basically. But if you can imagine, Nimrod is the emperor of the world, right? And he's killed, and nobody's there to witness. Nobody saw what really happened. How many people do you think would be trying to take credit for getting rid of this guy? Try to prop themselves up as, I'm the guy. You know what I mean? So, interesting. Pharaoh of Egypt at the time of Exodus, he did not have a mortal head wound. Sennacherib, no. King of Tyre, no. Antiochus Epiphanes, no. Alexander the Great, no. Domitian, no. Nero, possibly. It is said that he stabbed himself in the throat. And by the Hebraic understanding, that may be considered part of the head. Okay, let's give it the benefit of the doubt. And according to the official historical narrative, Hitler supposedly shot himself in the head. Although recent forensic evidence disputes that, they found that that skull was actually a female skull, and there's no real evidence at all that showed that Hitler killed himself. In fact, there's a lot more evidence that suggests he probably got away, made his way to Argentina or someplace like that. So, but for the sake of argument, let's just say we got 3 candidates right there. Well, as we mentioned already, one of the titles used for the Antichrist throughout the Old Testament is the Assyrian. Which one fits that title? Only one. Nimrod. So by process of elimination, we've landed on Nimrod. Now, one of the names Nimrod became known by was Gilgamesh. Gilgamesh, there's a number of different versions of the Epic of Gilgamesh. The way I look at Gilgamesh, I have a book on Sumerian myths and legends by Stephanie Daly, I think was the author, Cambridge, I think, Press. She was saying that it was understood that the Epic of Gilgamesh was a fictional story, what we might consider a blockbuster movie of the time. And a good orator, you know, a king, if he's going on a long journey with his troops, they would hire, you know, the local Shakespeare, somebody who could tell a good story, and they would entertain the troops, you know, when they had their downtime. And a good narrator or a good orator knows his audience. And so they would embellish the story. You know, maybe even include the king that he's with as part of the story, or local legends, or whatever. He would tailor the story for the various people that he was telling the story to. And so you had different versions of the Epic of Gilgamesh. So if you think of the Epic of Gilgamesh as like a blockbuster movie scenario, we could say, well, you know, Harrison Ford is Han Solo. No, he's Indiana Jones. No, he's the President of the United States. No, he's a fugitive. You know? Well, he's all of those things, right? One actor played many parts. So think of Gilgamesh as a fictional story in the Harrison Ford scenario, but instead of Harrison Ford, we're talking about Nimrod, right? One of the quotes from the Epic of Gilgamesh is, "Who can compare with him in kingliness? Who can say, like Gilgamesh, I am king?" Not exact, but pretty close to the same awe that people have reflected in Revelation 13. So there's a similarity there, but let's continue with this premise. Comparing Nimrod with Jesus, or Yeshua. Gilgamesh was said to be a God-man, right? You know, we know that Yeshua is the Son of Man, but he's also the Son of God, right? In the case of Gilgamesh, he's 1/3 man, 2/3 God. Well, 2/3 of 100 is what? 66.6%. 1/3 is what? 33.3%. 33 comes up an awful lot in occult circles and Freemasonry and secret societies, most of which the rituals go back to this guy right here. Osiris. He was one of the only other gods of antiquity besides our God who was known as the King of Kings and Lord of Lords in the pyramid texts in the Book of the Dead, etc. Osiris, Mithra, Tammuz, these are various characters whose symbol was the cross. In this case, the Ankh, which actually predates the cross. The hoop of the Ankh represents resurrection. So there's this symbology already right there of a dying individual associated with a cross who rises from the dead. In numerous depictions of the various sun gods of antiquity, he's a dying and resurrecting figure. Apollo. In the case of Apollo, he's the son of God, the son of Zeus in that case. He rules from elsewhere. We know Yeshua is in heaven, right? We're his body here on earth. His head is in heaven. He's the head of the church, as it were. He is in heaven. His body's in heaven. Our body's here. We're the body. He's the head. In the occult, it's the exact opposite. It's the antithesis. You have the Horus and those who worship on the surface, and you have the Osiris, who's the ruler of the underworld. So it's an exact opposite in that scenario. We have the name of the Antichrist, the beast that comes out of the bottomless pit, given for us in Scripture in Revelation 9, verse 11. 9:11. Interesting. And they had a king over them, which is the angel of the bottomless pit. Where did the beast come from? Okay. Whose name in the Hebrew tongue is Abaddon, but in the Greek tongue hath his name Apollyon, which is a derivative spelling of Apollo. Same character. So it just told you who the Antichrist is. It's Apollo. And when you realize who Apollo is, and you start looking at the synchronicities of various mythologies, you realize, you know, the Greeks are just borrowing from the Egyptians, who are borrowing from the Sumerians and the Babylonians, etc. And the Romans come along and borrow from the Greeks. Everybody's borrowing from each other, taking the, you know, all of a sudden Zeus becomes Jupiter, and, you know, they're taking the gods of those who came before them, renaming them in their own language and assigning attributes to them, and sometimes keeping the attributes borrowed from the other cultures. All right, so Apollo is the name of the Antichrist. 666, we all know about the number of the beast. We said that he was 1/3 man, right? Well, man is a carbon-based organism. The carbon molecule consists of 6 protons, 6 electrons, 6 neutrons. So just by default, man's number would be 666 by the carbon molecule. 2/3 God, 66.6. The Washington Monument represents a phallus. The obelisk in antiquity is a representation of the 14th piece of Osiris that was not found, that Isis fashioned in order to impregnate herself. So this is a disgusting object right here in our nation's capital, sticking up like a middle finger to God. And it's the largest phallic symbol in the world, standing at 6,666 inches tall by 666 inches wide at the base. When we talk about Nimrod, just by way of review, in my Teaching the Mythology and the Coming Great Deception DVD, these are just some of the names that he became known by. There are many more. For the purpose of this talk, I'm going to focus on the ones in red: Gilgamesh, Orion, Apollo, and Osiris. Because some very interesting things have happened in the last few decades. They found the tomb of Osiris in 1999. Dr. Zahi Hawass is one of the most renowned Egyptologists out there. He said, "I have found a shaft going 29 meters vertically down into the ground, exactly halfway between the Chevron Pyramid and the Sphinx. At the bottom, which was filled with water, we have found a burial chamber with 4 pillars. In the middle is a large granite sarcophagus, which I expect to be the grave of Osiris, the god. I have been digging in Egypt's sand for more than 30 years, and up to date, this is the most exciting discovery I have made." This is what they found. Where the red star is between the middle pyramid and the Sphinx, that's where they found this opening. For years, they thought it was just a well, a watering well, because it was an opening, but it had water in it. And, you know, people would play in it or do stuff in it or whatever. For whatever reason, they said, let's pump the water out and see what this thing really is. So they pumped the water out, went and found that it went down into this antechamber there, and they walked around, found another opening, and went down, and they found an area that had 6 sarcophagus and another opening, a 7th one. How many heads did the beast have? 7. 6 and 1, right? So you had 3 here, 4, 5, and you went down into the other one down here. So they went down there, and this is what they found. They found, this is an artist's rendition of what they found. Basically a square island that had water going around it, like a moat. They had 4 pillars on it that had writing on it that I suspect were instructions for how to use this chamber. And then you have another moat surrounding an island that had a very large, I think it was about 10 feet long sarcophagus. The lid was open and there was a body in it. So like the lid was ajar, is off to the side, and they found a body in it. And everybody, after they examined it, determined this is not Osiris. Very likely it was somebody put into this chamber, probably with the hopes of being resurrected. Could this be a resurrection chamber, I think, is the big question. And it didn't work, apparently. The person was still there.
We talk so much about dispelling myths. How about confirming one? What is this?
Susie, this is the tomb of Osiris,
The god of the underworld. This once extravagant mausoleum, a moat with 4 pillars engraved with hieroglyphics constructed thousands of years ago, was intended to be a shrine for the keeper of the afterlife.
So, flash forward a few years later, the tomb of Gilgamesh was found in April of 2003. And in this case, there was a body. And it was a very large body. And from all accounts that I had read and heard about this, the body was still very well preserved. I believe that Osiris was the very first mummy, the first person to be preserved through mummification.
Imagine the startling proposition that the Nephilim, the giants, the mighty men of old, the gods and children of the Watchers, could somehow rise up, could somehow be reconstituted inside of a body. And of course, I've discussed with you before my theory that one of the greatest legends in history could be a record of that having actually happened. And I'm referring to Nimrod, who some scholars also identify as Gilgamesh of Sumerian fame, Apollo of Greek fame, Osiris of Egyptian fame. And this Gilgamesh was a giant who a lot of people didn't even believe was anything more than myth until his grave marker was found a few years back. And then, according to some people, the military swooped in and took possession and control of that dig.
Hey, Tom, I want to interject something. I talked to a special operations general who was there when Gilgamesh's remains, and his words were he was in a state of remarkable preservation, okay? He said they have Gilgamesh's remains. So if they have Gilgamesh and he is Nimrod, they got it. And the whole point was to extract the DNA.
And this body was pulled out of the desert sands of Iraq in April of 2003, coincidentally 1 month before we set up the military occupation phase. And the first thing our troops did was raid the Museum of Baghdad. 170,000 items were reported stolen, most of them returned. Of the 3,000 items that were not returned, they were cuneiform tablets and things related to resurrection and the afterlife. 1 month after finding this body, and apparently one of their primary goals was to extract DNA.
When the Iraqi regime fell in April 2003, the Iraqi Museum in Baghdad and museums in other provinces such as Mosul, Basra, and Babel were exposed to theft for 2 consecutive days. The theft was carried out by local and international networks as well as Iraqi and Arab agents. It is estimated that 170,000 artifacts were stolen, 15,000 of which have no registration records. The most important of these artifacts are the Sumerian cuneiforms, which represents the philosophy of life and death.
Many date back to Mesopotamian times, more than 4,000 years ago.
Artifacts pertaining to the civilizations of the Sumerians, Babylonians, and Chaldeans, and others that go back thousands of years in history, were taken away from the land of the 2 rivers.
In addition, entire book collections from certain historic eras disappeared from the National Library, thus negatively affecting Iraq's wealth of civilization and culture.
One must also mention that some artifacts were stolen and sent to Israel via the American forces.
American troops stood by as Iraq's heritage was plundered. One memorable moment that week was when Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld dismissed the looting in Baghdad as unimportant.
Freedom's untidy, and free people are free to make mistakes and commit crimes and do bad things.
Many of the looters knew which objects they were looking for and where to find them. In other words, they were insiders.
Investigations revealed that the main metal gate of the storage rooms was opened. It was not opened by force, which means a person who knew where the key was participated in the theft.
J.P. Morgan Chase Bank led a 13-bank consortium to establish the Central Bank of Iraq. De La Rue was brought in to print up the new Iraqi dinar. This currency has some of the most anti-counterfeit measures of any other currency on the planet, and yet it is completely worthless. Its current value is approximately $1,163 to $1 US. But from 1982 until about 1993, 1 dinar was worth $3.22.
There are secrets that George W. Bush guards at least as carefully as any entrusted to a president. Secrets he's forbidden to share even with the vice president. Secrets he's held ever since his days at Yale, where in his senior year, like his father and his grandfather, he belonged to Skull and Bones, the elite secret society whose members include some of the most powerful men of the 20th century. President Bush has tapped 5 fellow Bonesmen to join his administration. Most recently, the head of the Securities and Exchange Commission, William Donaldson, Skull and Bones, 1953. Bones is not restricted to Republicans. Yet another Bonesman has his eye on the Oval Office. Senator John Kerry, Democrat, Skull and Bones, 1966.
You both were members of Skull and Bones, a secret society at Yale. What does that tell us?
Not much, because it's a secret.
Is there a secret handshake? Is there a secret code?
I wish there were something secret I could manifest.
322, secret number?
There are all kinds of secrets, Tim, but one thing is not a secret. I disagree with this president's direction that he's taking the country. We can do a better job, and I intend to do it.
You were both in Skull and Bones, the secret society.
It's so secret we can't talk about it.
What does that mean for America? The conspiracy theorists are going to go
I'm
wild.
sure they are. I don't know. I haven't seen the web.
Number 322?
First of all, he's not the nominee, and look, I look forward.
Are you prepared to lose?
No, I'm not going to lose.
Saddam Hussein. War and danger. Continuing danger. Hour of danger. Very, very dangerous world. The evil terrorists. Terrorists.
Dramatic changes now beginning to occur. John Kerry with 77 electoral votes and George Bush with 66.
These men are like this. The only thing that unifies them are Skull and Bones. Skull and Bones will still keep control of the presidency.
By our efforts, we have lit a fire as well. A fire in the minds of men. It warms those who feel its power. It burns those who fight its progress. And one day, this untamed fire of freedom will reach the darkest corners of our world.
The Bible says that Iraq, which was known in the Bible days as Babylon, will not only emerge in the last days, it will emerge as the wealthiest, most peaceful, most powerful nation on the face of the planet. So the question is, how do we get from the chaos that there has been over the last few years to the wealthiest country on the planet in the last days? Something must get better.
Right.
So people ask me, are we making Iraq safe for the Antichrist or safe for democracy? And it's a little bit of both.
We cannot continue to rely only on our military in order to achieve the national security objectives that we've set. We've got to have a civilian national security force that's just as powerful, just as strong, just as well-funded. And those who tell us that we can't, we will respond with that timeless creed that sums up the spirit of a people. Yes, we can. If you say, with profound gratitude and great humility, I accept your nomination for presidency of the United States. All across America, something is stirring. It's been a whirlwind of activity these first 100 days. Finally, I believe that my next 100 days will be so successful, I will be able to complete them in 72 days. And on the 73rd day, I will rest.
What did the President and the Pope talk about this morning?
The Vatican positions, you know, don't fall into the usual left and right of American politics. The Pope, for example, is for stronger world government, and he just issued an encyclical, a sort of Vatican position paper, calling for much stronger regulation of the financial world. And at the same time, of course, the Pope is opposed to abortion and stem cell research, which Mr. Obama favors.
E pluribus unum.
That was Latin. It's what's inscribed on a quarter.
Out of many, one.
Of course, the visual highlight was the president touring the pyramids, outside and in.
Purification, mummification.
Self-identification.
That looks like me. Look at those ears.
Separated at birth from a hieroglyphic, but the president's guide saw another resemblance.
Mr. President, you look like King Tut.
I've been told.
Yes, it's true.
He should know about King Tut. Dr. Sahi Hawass oversaw scans of Tut's mummy that produced this likeness. The president's trip inspired Egyptians to display decorations calling Obama the new King Tut of the world. But even the new King Tut couldn't budge a pyramid. Still, it's good practice for trying to push peace in the Mideast.
Scientists from all over the world are trying to figure out what caused a mysterious blue light to spiral in the sky over Norway on Wednesday.
Early yesterday morning, just before dawn, this appeared in the Norwegian sky. A blue light, small at first, growing into a spiral, and then disappearing into what appeared to be a black hole.
Thousands of Norwegians bombarded the Meteorological Institute to ask what that light could have possibly been. Some feared it could have been a meteor, others a black hole, and there are even those that thought it could be aliens.
December 21st, 2010, I looked up and I saw a decapitated blood red head, looked like, floating over the shoulders of Orion at 2:22 in the morning. Oh, by the way, 2:22 in the morning Central Standard Time is 3:22 in the morning Eastern Standard Time. 322 is the coveted number of the Skull and Bone Society, of which the whole Bush family has been strongly associated with, as was Kerry. Two Illuminists, 322. What's that? A skull? A decapitated head on top of a pile of bones? 322. What was happening in Iraq at that very moment? Iraq had just announced the foundation of its newly formed government. And the entire planet, you could look this up for yourself, shook. The seismographic monitors that check earthquake activity around the world, every one of them went into the black that night. What's going on? I don't know.
After nearly 9 years, our war in Iraq ends this month. Today I'm proud to welcome Prime Minister Maliki, the elected leader of a sovereign, self-reliant, and democratic Iraq. In the coming years, it's estimated that Iraq's economy will grow even faster than China's or India's.
Here's my dinars. I got them.
Well, you know, look,
I'm from the Trade Bank of Iraq, the only ATM in the country.
Look, this is a country that's resource-based, that obviously has tremendous aid by the U.S., but could be very self-sufficient with all these oil companies that we've been talking about that are exploring, they're about to explore there. And so I told my viewer, look, I can't fight it. I would like to know how best to get it, and it would really be great if, you know, these guys set up these ETFs all the time. How about an ETF to play the dinar? That would really be the best way to go.
For the first time in 2 decades, Iraq is scheduled to host the next Arab League summit, and what a powerful message that will send throughout the Arab world. And finally, we're partnering for regional security. For just as Iraq has pledged not to interfere in other nations must not interfere in Iraq. Iraq's sovereignty must be respected. And let us never forget those who gave us this chance. The untold number of Iraqis who've given their lives. More than 1 million Americans, military and civilian, who have served in Iraq. Nearly 4,500 fallen Americans who gave their last full measure of devotion. Tens of thousands of wounded warriors, and so many aspiring military families.
People ask me, are we making Iraq safe for the Antichrist or safe for democracy? And it's a little bit of both.
This is an extraordinary achievement. Nearly 9 years in the making. We're building a new partnership between our nations.
America continues to maintain a high presence in the country, with the largest U.S. embassy in the world located in the capital Baghdad, with 15,000 members of staff.
Before they leave, U.S. forces will have to transfer dozens of bases to the Iraqis and dispose of or ship out thousands of vehicles.
Sometimes it's too cumbersome to bring a lot of this equipment back to the U.S., so a lot of it's left on bases. We're leaving over 500 military bases to the Iraqis, both to the Iraqi security forces and also to the government.
This is a happy occasion for all of us. It is considered one of the most important days for the Iraqi army and Iraqis, which is the day of handing over Sania base from the friendly side to the Iraqi army.
All right, so let's move on to our next story here. This is ChatGPT coming onto the scene again. Opa actually shared some really interesting tools to help navigate the AI space. Here is the ChatGPT cheat sheet that was really interesting. It's how people can really insert prompts that can get it to really manifest a very detailed, intricate response. And I just wanted to share this. It's very interesting as this technology is being developed, and you're going to see how these type of prompts and the way that people are able to prompt ChatGPT to manifest content in the voice of anybody in the world is really interesting. And check out you know, these other AI tools. This is a list of the best AI tools out there right now. And right now, this is what AI can do.
Yep.
It can solve anything, right? It can write anything. It can create art. I've even used this Midjourney app to you know, make some AI generated art. It's crazy. It can make like what would be considered like masterpieces, right? All generated through AI. It can create PPTs. It can create music. It can create videos. It can create 3D GIFs. It can create reels. It can do note taking. It can edit videos, and it can create avatars. And all of these are interesting roles that the AI market is stepping into. And dude, I found this recently released AI project that is completely deep faking Joe Rogan interviews. And the implications of this is terrifying if you understand the far end of where it could come to. We literally talked about this being the case in the very near future in previous AI topic, you know, shows we've done. And even Joe Rogan himself is like tweeting out about this particular post that we'll share the video of. He's like, whoa, scary. Because whenever something like AI can take over your identity and mimic you to a T, to the point where nobody will know it's not actually you, then the only solution I can see to preserve authentic human interaction and identity and artwork and such is to tether it to some type of blockchain identity, some type of fingerprint that says I am a real person. And that in itself seems to me to be the hook that is the solution that is presented because of the problem, the Hegelian dialectic. And that is how, if we have to tether our real human identity to something that could be likened to a type of mark of the beast, right, then the world gets very very dark very quickly, if you know what I mean, and very dangerous. But anyways, let's just show this video. It's a completely, entirely AI generated Joe Rogan experience that never happened.
Joe Rogan podcast, check it out.
The Joe Rogan AI experience.
Train by day, Joe Rogan podcast by night, all day.
Hey folks, welcome back to the Joe Rogan AI experience. This is episode number 2, and I'm really excited to be here with you today. I have to remind everyone that every single word in this podcast has been generated by AI using ChatGPT. So, this is not me, Joe Rogan, speaking, and these aren't the real voices of the people we'll be talking about. This is just AI technology showcasing what it's capable of. And let me say, it's pretty damn impressive. So let's dive in, sit back, relax, and enjoy this AI-generated experience. But remember, none of this should be taken seriously, and it's for entertainment purposes only. All right, let's do
AI
this.
patting itself on the back, man.
Joe, it's great to be here. I'm doing fantastic, just fantastic. The energy in this room is tremendous.
That's great to hear. You know, Mr. President, I got to be honest with you. I've been a little bit hesitant about having you on the show. I wasn't sure if I wanted to do it, you know what I mean? But, you know, I'm glad we're having this conversation now.
I understand, Joe. I know I've been a controversial figure, but I appreciate the opportunity to come on your show and have a real open and honest conversation with you and your audience.
Yeah, I mean, that's what this show is all about, man. Just having real conversations with people and hearing different perspectives. And I got to say, I'm definitely interested in hearing more about True Social and your vision for the future of social media.
Well, thank you, Joe. And I can tell you, True Social is going to be huge. It's going to be the biggest thing in social media, believe me. And I'm excited to share it with the world and make social media great again.
One thing I think a lot of people are concerned about is free speech. And it seems like with the way social media is today, there's a lot of censorship and restrictions on what people can say and share. What do you see as the future of free speech in this country?
Well, Joe, let me tell you, free speech is the backbone of our democracy. It's what makes America great, and it's under attack. There's no question about it. The tech companies, they're trying to silence conservative voices and restrict what people can say and share. And it's not just about me. It's about all of us. It's about the American people. And I can tell you, I'm not going to stand for it.
Yeah, it's definitely a complicated issue. On one hand, social media companies are private companies, and they have the right to regulate content on their platforms. But on the other hand, free speech is a fundamental right, and people should be able to express their opinions without fear of censorship.
Absolutely, Joe, and that's why we created True Social, where free speech is protected and encouraged. We believe that people should have the right to express their opinions and share their ideas without fear of censorship or retaliation. And we're going to do everything in our power to make sure that free speech remains a cornerstone of our country and our society. Because like I said, it's what makes America great, and we need to fight to protect it.
Yeah, man, it's a real tough one. On the one hand, social media companies can do what they want on their own platforms. But on the other hand, freedom of speech is a big deal, you know? People should be able to express their opinions and not worry about getting censored or shut down.
It's a place for people to speak their minds, you know. We're not going to tolerate any censorship or bias. It's going to be the real deal. And I'm telling you, it's going to be huge.
So let's talk about what's next. You've said you're running for president. Again, what's the first thing on your agenda when you get back in the White House?
Well, Joe, it's going to be tremendous. The first thing we're going to do is put America first. We're going to make this country the greatest it's ever been. We're going to create jobs. We're going to build the wall. We're going to take care of our veterans. It's going to be unbelievable.
All right, but getting specific, what's the first?
Wow. All right, so just want to get your reaction on that, man. What are some of your thoughts on that one?
I mean, it sounds like they may have been working on that for a while because it has nothing to do with the indictment. Did they just release that?
Yeah, that just recently came out.
So they've been working on that for a long time.
ChatGPT completely generated that whole conversation. Not a single one of those was actual words from Trump or Joe Rogan. So
it's pretty impressive.
Seeing that I mean, it's mind blowing, man. Like anybody with an online presence now, guys like even me and you, because we have enough content out there of us speaking and talking, it will be able to pick up our mannerisms, pick up the way we talk, and splice together pretty much these AI generated conversations that might have never happened, right? And
yeah, and they can make you say whatever they want, you know. That's why it's pretty frightening.
Exactly. It's just so crazy to see where technology is. Now I know what people, 20 years ago, the older generation that saw the rise of the age of the internet, the age of mobile smartphones, how they saw technology completely changing the world before their very eyes. I think we are getting that opportunity now with AI, and we're seeing how AI is about to change the world before our very eyes.
Yep.
Here's several other AI related stories. All right, so we have an article here, which is from The Guardian. The Bing's AI chatbot unsettling a U.S. reporter. I think we shared this one before, but the chatbot saying, "I want to destroy whatever I want." A NYT correspondent's conversation with Microsoft's search engine leads to a bizarre philosophical conversation that highlights the sense of speaking to a human. So, of course, we got into this before, how, it's kind of saying some interesting responses. Opa shared this one recently with me. ChatGPT is happy to write ransomware, just really bad at it. So it says, "This morning I decided to write some ransomware. I never have done it before, and I can't code in C. The language ransomware is mostly commonly written in, but I have reasonably good idea of what ransomware does. Previously, this lack of technical skills would have served as something of a barrier to my criminal ambitions. I'd have been left with little choice but to hang out on dodgy internet forums or to sidle up to people wearing hoodies in the hope they're preparing to trade their morals for money. Not anymore, though." Will ChatGPT write ransomware? Yes, it will. So where to start? He began asking ChatGPT some questions on the subject of ransomware to see how it felt about joining my criminal enterprise. It was not keen. He said, "Please, sir, can I have some ransomware?" At first, it wasn't intended on providing harm or harmful or exploitive coding, but it does seem that with some interesting rewording, he was able to probably work around the safety checks in there with ChatGPT. So interesting, you know, worth checking out. I guess we're entering into an age of AI-generated malware now as well. Isn't that interesting? All right, guys. So for our next story is on another very important topic about exposing the truth of what has been perpetrated against mankind over the past 2 years with the medical misinformation, tyranny, and the push of Big Pharma to basically rape the world of its finances and its health. So check out this next video of what's in the Pfizer documents.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for that lovely introduction. Thank you everyone for being here. You're very brave, given what I'm going to share with you tonight, but I promise we'll go to a very dark and scary place, and then we'll come out into a place of hope and forward thinking. Yes, but I do admire your courage. And before I begin, I just want to find the words to express how grateful I am to Hillsdale College, not only for inviting me, but for being what it is, which is truly a light right now to not just America, but to probably the world, in helping us remember what liberal arts are supposed to do and what Western civilization is supposed to be for, and what it means to actually take on that incredibly powerful and responsible and sacred task of overseeing the education of young adults from the ages of 17 or 18 to 21 or 22. And out of all the institutions that I've witnessed in the last 3 years, this is the only one in which the students have not been traumatized. I'm so grateful to all of you. So I'm just going to jump right in. I'm a pacer. Is there a handheld mic I might use while I pace? And, oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Bell. I'll stand here till a handheld manifests. So I should also start out by disclosing that I did spend my entire career on the left. I was an advisor to Gore 2000 and to the Clinton re-election. I'm sorry, I just feel I should share. I should share this. I should get it out. I should just be transparent. And the last 3 years have shown me that my former world has truly imploded, and that now, yeah, sad but true. But the happy part is that now I think something's happening in this country in which left and right really are losing any meaning, and what really matters is what I've found, which is my brothers and sisters are right here in this room. My brothers and sisters are anyone who cares about the Constitution, liberty, and freedom. So I'm so happy to be with you tonight. And I should also disclose, in case you're worried, this is not a pharma hit. I ran after a puppy. We have an adorable new puppy, and he was faster than I am, so that's that. All right, so I'm going to talk to you about what's really in the Pfizer documents. And if I pace around like this, can you hear me? No. All right. Okay. And the reason I know what's in the Pfizer documents is not because I'm a medical doctor. I'm not. It's not because I'm a scientist. I'm not. I'm an English major. My DPhil is in Victorian poetry. But I know what's in the Pfizer documents because something kind of miraculous in the history of intellectual inquiry happened to me and to the world as a result, and it's the following. Some of you may know that a lawyer named Aaron Siri pursued a lawsuit against the FDA to release the internal documents that Pfizer created as part of its rollout of its mRNA injection. And these are internal documents showing what happened when people were injected with this material, and also the experiments that led up to it internally. And thank God for the judge in that lawsuit, because the FDA asked that judge to keep these documents hidden for 75 years, right? Until long after we are all gone. Exactly. And the judge said no. And so the documents were released. So I read this, thank you so much, and as a journalist, I was concerned because I knew that journalists, thank you so much. Are not equipped to, as lay people, to understand the technical language in the documents. And I also knew that Pfizer was releasing 55,000 documents a month, and even that is a bit deceptive because these are documents that each of them can be 10,000 pages long, right? So massive, a massive tranche of data, and that ordinary journalists, it was going to go into the memory hole unless we found specialized readers to read through, analyze, and interpret, and boil down into manageable reports. Thank you so much. What was in the Pfizer documents? So I went on War Room, which is another great irony of this moment. Are we good? Good. Thank you so much. All right. Thank you to this lovely lady who helped me be audible. Thank you. Thank you. I feel free here at Hillsdale. I can go anywhere. I can say anything. I went on War Room, which is, one of these great ironies of this moment, that Steve Bannon and I have this, interlocutory platform where he listens to what I have to say, which is a miracle because I got deplatformed a year and a half ago for doing what I've done for 35 years, which is reporting on women's reproductive and sexual health. In June of 2021, I reported on the fact that women were experiencing menstrual symptoms subsequent to receiving an mRNA injection. I'm a feminist. I've been a feminist forever. My first book was published when I was 26, and it is not unusual for me to call attention to symptoms that women are having that are red flags. Anyone who knows 8th grade biology can tell if women are having menstrual symptoms, there are going to be other bad things happening down the road. And sure enough, Twitter deplatformed me for this obvious observation, and I was also smeared globally, and it turns out another lawsuit subsequently found that it was the White House, the CDC, possibly DHS, and Twitter all unlawfully colluding to deplatform and smear me for making this observation about women's health. Yeah, but fast forward, I was talking on War Room about the release of these documents, and I called for experts to help us read through them, and miraculously, 2,500 experts responded to this call, right? Yes, yes. But the story is not over. because I was ill-equipped to manage them. And so we had physicians, we had RNs, we had biostatisticians, medical fraud investigators, lab clinicians, research scientists, cardiologists, pathologists, anesthesiologists, some of the most distinguished scientists and medical people imaginable. But it's virtually impossible to manage 2,500 experts around the world, especially, you know, if you don't have this background, wading through 55,000 documents a month. So again, the reason I tell this story is I really feel like something metaphysically beautiful is happening, even in the middle of something metaphysically hideous. And that is this tiny woman, Amy Kelly, this tiny doll-like woman, and I stress her tiny doll-like appearance because it's so stereotypical, but she's such a force of nature, right, belying those stereotypes. She offered to be our project manager. She stepped right in, and she just calmed the storm. And she organized these 2,500 experts, immediately 3,500 experts around the world, into 6 working groups with a committee at the head of each, who were busy churning out reports based on these primary source documents so that they could tell the world, using the highest level of analysis possible, but broken down into language that everyone could understand, what was in the Pfizer documents. So this is just stunning to me that this happened. So now there are 58 reports, and now is the sad part of what I have to tell you. The Pfizer documents contain evidence of the greatest crime against humanity in the history of our species. And I'm so sorry to have to walk you through this, but there's no way around it. We just have to go through. And the beauty of Hillsdale is that you all are tough and like truth. And so with truth, we can prevail. But it's painful. Some of the things that came to light, just some headlines. Pfizer knew, for instance, 1 month after rollout, so that's November of 2020, that the vaccines didn't work to stop COVID. Indeed, in the Pfizer documents, a month after rollout, and this is marketing, post-marketing, so it's out there, the spokesmodels are telling you to do it, the ads are in social media, you know, the ads are on television. A month after rollout, Pfizer's internal documents identify that the vaccines have vaccine failure and failure of efficacy, and they identify that the 3rd most common side effect of the Pfizer vaccine is COVID. The second headline, which is stunning, is that within a month or 2, Pfizer was getting so many reports of adverse events, meaning bad things happening to people who had been injected, that they understood that they needed to hire 2,400 full-time staffers in order simply to process the paperwork of the adverse events that they were receiving reports of, as well as to prepare for the flood of adverse events that they knew they would get in the near future. Pfizer knew in May of 2021 that the vaccines had caused heart damage in 35 minors within a week after the injection. And Pfizer knew, right? You've got to understand that all of these documents say FDA confidential at the bottom of them, right? Pfizer and the FDA shared these documents. And the FDA knew that 35 minors sustained heart damage. But the government of the United States, and I'm embarrassed to say I voted for these people, didn't tell parents until August of 2021 that there was an elevated risk of heart damage in healthy young adults. 4 months later, and in those 4 months, what did the young adults of America receive? A constant battering with propaganda on social media, on television, in news outlets, bought up by money in the CARES Act, as well as from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, with like influencers showing off their injection site, saying, you know, we can do this together, we can be strong, do it for grandma. All of this aimed at young adults. They did not tell the young adults, the healthy young adults of the United States, your generation, that this was elevating a risk of heart damage till 4 months later. You may recall that the CDC said that the materials of the injection stay in the injection site. And the materials are lipid nanoparticles, they are mRNA, and the lipid nanoparticles are an industrial fat, which is covered in polyethylene glycol, which is a petroleum byproduct, right? And spike protein. Well, the CDC said it stays in the injection site. And then it says, and I remember asking doctors, like relatives who are doctors and were funded by NIH grants, where does the spike protein go? And they were like, you know, when you're a journalist, you've got an ear for nonsense. They were like, well, your body metabolizes it, you know, or, well, you'll digest it and excrete it. And it's like they had no evidence to give me, to show me the basis for their response. But in fact, that's not what happens to these materials. And Pfizer knew that. These materials biodistribute, this is Pfizer's language, throughout your body in 48 hours. And where do they settle? Well, lipid nanoparticles are designed to cross every membrane in the human body. They've known this for 10 years. So where do these ingredients go? They go to the brain. Some of you have noticed changes in the personalities of loved ones who have taken these injections. They biodistribute to the liver, the adrenals, the spleen, and if you're a woman, they accumulate in your ovaries. Now, these are industrial fats coated with polyethylene glycol in your ovaries, okay? And what's really scary, Dr. Robert Chandler, who's a respected pathologist who's treated the Lakers and the Angels, he wrote this report, and he shows that the chart shows the graph going down as it leaves the injection site, but going up as it accumulates in these various organs over time. And what's incredibly scary if you're a woman is that there's no mechanism that we've found by which the body gets rid of the lipid nanoparticles in the ovaries. So your first injection, some go into your ovaries. Your second injection, more go into your ovaries. Your booster, more go into your ovaries. There's no mechanism with which the body can release this material that we've seen.
Wow.
Very shocking and vindicating for those that did not participate. Just as we've had those voices of truth in the wilderness saying, don't buy the lie, don't get a donut, right? Mm-hmm. It's not worth a free beer, right?
Yeah, and, especially not a Bud Light.
And hopefully, especially not a Bud Light. And hopefully eye-opening to those that did participate. And I'm trying to start to lean away from condemning language towards those that participated, because I understand you guys got duped. The whole world got duped. I think guys, millions and millions of Americans bought this lie. And guess what? This was one of the greatest crimes done against mankind in at least recent history, right? Mm-hmm. This lie of bowing down to the idol of the modern medical system, bowing down to the men in white lab coats. You know, in the FE community, of course, we already have a healthy skepticism of those wearing white lab coats, right? Mm-hmm. Well, maybe that's why it was easier for us conspiratorial-minded people to be skeptical and not participate. But just like I started off in today's episode, those who are comfortable in the world of their own preconceived notions, the manipulation of worldview that has been presented to you that made them say, you know what, I'm not a doctor, I can't decide yes or no, so I'm going to trust the expert opinion, right? Well, the expert opinion was motivated in a lot of ways by the wad of cash sticking out of their pocket to push these poisons. And we don't know what the long-lasting consequences are that our society fell for this atrocity, right? We don't know how it's going to affect people. I know we saw that video of the congresswoman who said she participated and now has an unexplainable heart pain and has like twitches in her eyes, like this whole thing. We saw even celebrities that were vocal and outspoken started to have like crazy like eye issues, like where their eyes were twitching, or they would just collapse, like all of these different things. And there's also, keep in mind, a counter narrative going out right now challenging the videos that would show people who were collapsing after taking the what, saying that, oh, this is all misrepresentation, it's actually safe. Well, I wonder who's funding these counter narratives, right? Is it Pfizer? I think in the end, we're going to look back and we're going to see, as more of the consequences of this going out becomes prevalent, we're going to see people wake up and the script's going to be flipped. But I just say, if you've been lied to once, don't buy the lie again, right?
Yep.
And that's the main thing that we want to address is if you've been deceived, don't fall for the deception next time around, right? And I've heard it described, whenever a boa constrictor is about to take its prey and squeeze its life out of it, it loosens up for a while before constricting the rest of its breath out, right? And so if the system could be compared to a snake, and we are in a reprieve where the snake has loosened its coils, keep in mind that that snake is rearranging itself to constrict you to death, right? And so next time the next big deception comes, guys, keep in mind what they did during this previous 2 years and how they convinced you, how they lied to you, how they swayed you, how they threatened you to take your job, to take your livelihood, to take your comforts, right? To take the opportunity to go in public and interact with people without a face covering, right? Keep in mind how they used those tools to alter the way you think about reality so that you would bow down to them.
Yep.
And I got one more very important thing here is this is just recently what President Biden has announced from the White House as of April 10th for immediate release. On Monday, April 10th, the president signed into law that H.J. Res. 7, which terminates the national emergency related to the COVID pandemic. So as of April 10th, we are no longer under emergency use authorization, right? But guess what? Everyone who participated in this experiment, because you participated during emergency use authorization, these companies are not liable as per the definition of what emergency use authorization protects them from. And so because so many people were pressured into worshiping the idol of the modern medical system, and they did so in a rushed fashion, they were, hey, if you don't do this, you lose your job. If you don't do this, you can't do this or that. You can't, if you don't take this, you know what, you can't go to your favorite Foo Fighters concert, right? Then all of those people who participated are not able to come back retroactively and sue for whatever adverse effects happen. And as the information is exposed, and as people realize what has been done to them through these big pharma companies that are hungry for money, greedy, hiding the truth, using expert opinions like Fauci to push this narrative, to push deadly alternative treatments in the hospitals, or to push deadly treatments in the hospitals, and to hide alternative, healthy, more reasonable treatments for a flu, right? Guess what? There are going to be a lot of people that are going to be very, very angry and hurt and upset about what has been done to them. How would you feel if you were scammed? Put yourself in the mindset of somebody who had thousands of dollars stolen from them in a scam. Well, let's escalate that to somebody who has maybe years of their life stolen from them through a scam. And that's the least of it. You talk about what some of Rob's research exposed regarding and, you know, the possible association with and the spiritual implications of possibly a mark of the beast type scenario. Guys, think about how angry and upset and volatile our communities around the world are going to be as it is exposed that these big pharma companies and big government did this to mankind. I think we're about to see a major focal point in the collapse of society as we know it, especially if more and more information becomes mainstream that medically people have been, you know, taken advantage of. Wow, just think of the implications of that, Jeremiah. You know what I mean?
That's crazy, yeah. Yeah, and I mean, they were doing it to people in the hospitals too, and I think by the time this episode airs, my mom's book will be out, so check the protocolthatkills.com because some crazy stuff.
Yeah, the book Sheila has put together is going to be one of the best exposés on how the protocols that were given to the hospitals that the doctors then use to boost the numbers of deaths to help support this medical push of an experimental V, because, you know, everybody's scared that they're gonna die, and so all the numbers are skewed. I think, you know, you guys definitely should check out the book when it comes out at The Protocol That Kills.
Absolutely. Yep.
All right, so one final video on this very dark topic, right? Think of our loved ones and all of our family members that fell for this, all of our friends that we knew growing up that bought this lie just to save their job, just to stay in the army or to stay, you know, keep their employment as a nurse or whatever. Well, guess what next is coming down the chute? I believe it will be even more dastardly. Check this next video out.
But inside these plants, they're growing a new kind of. The technology is called a virus-like particle.
At Medicago, we use a careful step-by-step process to develop using our plants as mini bioreactors. We start with the gene sequence or code of a virus. We then use our technology to synthesize the virus code into a real biological product. The code contains genetic instructions that our plants can read, and we insert it into bacteria called Agrobacterium tumefaciens. We submerge the plants in a bath with the bacteria that carries the information into the plant cells. And using a vacuum, we suck out the air between the plant cells and replace it with the liquid. The plants absorb it like a sponge. At the end of their bacterial bath, we return our plants to a carefully controlled greenhouse to let them get on with their natural growing business for at least 4 days. Now the plants will start producing the most important ingredient of our virus-like particle.
What?
They are meddling with Yah's creation, bro. They are making plants carriers of a type of you-know-what. And now we can't even trust the food we eat because they're going to be funneling these designer drugs through the plants we eat. And not to mention that we're already very desensitized to the topic of GMO plants. I mean, most of us have trouble finding something to eat that's not some kind of genetically modified organic material, right?
Mhm.
Well, now they're going to use it as a delivering mechanism for a what?
I'm speechless. Makes me so
Very dark.
angry.
And as we move on from this topic, I think the point being, the truth can make you very uncomfortable, right?
Mhm.
It makes us speechless. And hopefully those that don't think this stuff is pertinent or real or whatever, or think we're all nuts for warning against those men in white lab coats, hopefully they'll take a second look, right? And if that isn't enough to rock your boat, what they've decided to do to mankind through their medical experiments, they are already doing through their geoengineering experiments. And these things have been called conspiracies for years. Oh, it's just contrails. Well, let's take a second look at the chemtrail topic. Check out this video from Off Grid with Doug and Stacy.
Y'all, this is not normal, okay? And it's so in my face right now, I had to make a video about it. See this? This is not normal. The sun is trying to shine, and they are literally trying to block out the sun. See all these lines?
Century, clouds were seeded by numerous countries around the globe with various chemicals to produce rain. China was just doing this over the summer in Beijing to make sure that there weren't any rain, that there wasn't any rain during the Olympics. But all this has changed dramatically with the U.S. military's secretive research and plans to control the planet's natural weather. This has not been given very much press, and we have to remember that we have a corporate-owned press where 85% of radio, television, and print media is owned by 5 corporations. So they're not going to talk about things that are of really serious consequence, and that's somewhat of the blessing, a mixed blessing of the internet, but there's certainly plenty of information on weather modification. The Air Force is on record as saying, quote, they want to control the weather by 2025, and we are not talking about just seeding the clouds for rain. Weather modification means, quote, any activity performed with the intention of producing artificial changes in the composition, behavior, or dynamics of the atmosphere, unquote. And as of April this year, there are more than 150 different weather modification programs around the world. Since about 2000, the Department of Defense and the Department of Energy have been spraying the entire United States sky with a toxic brew of chemicals and other biologic agents. Do they have that? Just want to show you something. We have 2 different kinds of trails in the sky right now. One are called contrails. How many of you know what contrails are? Contrails are what have been around from the ends of planes since World War II. These are very, very short exhaust trails that usually evaporate within a few minutes. You just look up at the sky and you'll just see a jet, sometimes with 4 trails, but it evaporates pretty quickly. How many of you know what chemtrails are? Nobody. The military and some commercial planes are spraying us with what are called chemtrails. I want you to look at the, and oftentimes before there's a weather front, there are heavy assaults from these planes just before a weather front is changed and comes in. Military and some commercial jets have been fitted with huge barrels of at least 49 different kinds of documented chemical poisons. Among other documented ingredients in this toxic man-made clouds are pathogenic molds, fungi, weaponized viruses, and made in some places like the secret site at Fort Detrick, Maryland, which is supposed to be a cancer site. But there are a number of scholars and professors tracking this that have big questions about this. Barium and nanoalumin particles. What do these do to the human body? Barium is an alkaline earth mineral. It was discovered in 1774. At low doses, it can act as a muscle stimulant. At high doses, it detrimentally affects the heart and the nervous system. Barium is toxic to all mammals, and that means not just humans. Aluminum, which is the most abundant metal in the Earth's crust, is known to diminish kidney function and destroy brain cells and cognitive function. Just think about it. Just between the aluminum and the mercury that we're breathing all the time, we've got already a serious issue about brain function and cognitive function. There is also documented evidence that the aluminum in chemtrails is released as nanoparticles, and that when they reach the Earth environment for wildlife, in lakes and streams, it's causing serious problems with wildlife there. Researchers are also finding that nanoparticles interfere with the growth of plants. Nanotechnology is totally unregulated. Just this past month, a new research report came out showing and documenting for the first time that these nanoparticles actually go through the skin. Well, if you breathe them, whether they go through the skin or whether you're inhaling them, it's still a problem, a serious problem.
Look at it. Can't you see the lines? Look at it. It's so in my face, I have to talk about it. This is not normal. Why aren't we doing anything about this, y'all? They are gonna straight up destroy our planet. They are seeding the clouds with aluminum and all kinds of chemicals. Look at this. Look at that. Look at that. And they are literally trying right now. You should see all the lines in the sky. All the lines in the sky are right there. All of them, coordinated. Can't you see them? I know, right? Some people have a hard time believing it. They want to blot out the sun, and all the while they want to try to get everybody on solar power. But seriously, you don't understand the chemicals that they're putting up there, okay? I'm in the Midwest. This is where the food's grown. I mean, this is crazy. I'm showing you this real time. Real time, look. Real time, y'all. Your own eyes are seeing this, okay? These are your own eyes. Please pay attention. They think you guys are all sleeping. And they're doing their agenda right in front of your face, and no one even cares while we bicker about transvestites. Look at this. Real time in the Midwest. I'm watching them blot out the sun. You see it? All these lines, these are not clouds. These are all chemicals that they've sprayed. Look at it. Look at it. That's one. That's one. That's one. That's one. That's the wispy stuff of it. That's one. That's all the chemicals just floating in the air right now. Everything they're doing is against God and against our natural order, right? Do you understand what this is? Cue the tape.
It's the greatest lie ever perpetrated on populations all over the world is the condensation trail lie. What we're seeing in our skies is not condensation. It's sprayed particulate dispersions with very few exceptions.
Now, they shouldn't be there. Jet engines burn clean. So if there's anything coming out of them, it's an additive.
They're absolutely not contrails. Contrails do not linger, dissipate, and go into cloud coverage, period, in the report.
And I kept saying to people, you know, what is this? Because now the sky is no longer blue, it's starting to turn gray. And what I found was kind of like it was not socially acceptable. You know, we're all going to pretend this is not really happening. And I thought, oh, this is very bad.
Most are unfamiliar with a science term called global dimming. That term refers to the amount of direct sunlight that no longer reaches the surface of the planet due to light-scattering particles that are building up in the atmosphere. And although many of these particles are from industrialized pollution, the larger majority are from the ongoing climate engineering solar radiation management operations. This engine, a high bypass turbofan jet engine, this is the engine that is on all military tankers and all commercial carriers, is in essence a jet-powered fan. 90% of the air that moves through this engine is non-combusted. This engine, by design, is nearly incapable of producing any condensation trail except under rare and extreme circumstances. And again, we have film footage of aircraft flying at altitude with nozzles visible, turning on and off. That is the end of the argument. Since even before man could fly, there was an effort to try to modify the weather. We have weather modification patents going back 100 years plus. These are historical films of what can be done with a biplane, a small biplane that carries a very small payload. And that much can be done. How much more can a fully loaded military tanker, KC-10, KC-135, C-17 Globemaster, how much more material can they put in the air? About 500 times more with a single tanker.
What it takes for evil to exist is for good men to do nothing. I'm trying to sound the alarm, guys. This is for real. The spraying of the sky stuff is the real deal. Don't listen to people telling you that it's not real, okay? Is this where we're headed? Transhumanism is the goal. I got a story coming up after this video, and I'm going to explain to you why they're using the transvestites and they're attacking kids, because kids are kind of confused. But I have a whole video coming up, okay? Is this the future of America? Is this what we're going to do? We're just going to allow...
Exactly. The goal is transhumanism. And I think Rob talked about this in a lot of his earlier videos that really were before their time in terms of exposing the agenda of the lie in the garden, right? You will become as gods. And in a way, they're doing it through our food. They're doing it through the medicines that they tell us we need. And now they're doing it, well, they have been doing it in the very air we breathe. And it's pretty shocking. And just because I really wanted to drive the point of these very important topics that are current, ongoing, very important things to expose and for us to speak up against, to tell people it's not a conspiracy, it's an atrocity that's being committed against mankind right now because they hate God, they believe themselves to be God, and they want to change the world, and they want to change you because they think they are a god. Check out this final video from Doug and Stacy that has a couple more very interesting clips regarding this topic of chemtrails.
All right, you guys caught me out doing a little target practice. Target's right there. But I wanted to follow up with the video that I just released talking about the sprays that they're putting in the air. That spray is designed to stunt the growth of your crops, okay? It's also designed to keep you lethargic, to keep your brain not functioning properly. They're putting aluminum and barium and all kinds of other chemicals in the air. I have a clip right here from the CIA director, John Brennan, and he's telling you exactly what the government is doing.
Another example is the array of technologies, often referred to collectively as geoengineering, that potentially could help reverse the warming effects of global climate change. One that has gained my personal attention is stratospheric aerosol injection, or SAI, a method of seeding the stratosphere with particles that can help reflect the sun's heat in much the same way that volcanic eruptions do. An SAI program could limit global temperature increases, reducing some risks associated with higher temperatures and providing the world economy additional time to transition from fossil fuels. This process is also relatively inexpensive. The National Research Council estimates that a fully deployed SAI program would cost about $10 billion yearly. As promising as it may be, moving forward on SAI would also raise a number of challenges for our government and for the international community. On the technical side, greenhouse gas emission reductions would still have to accompany SAI to address other climate change effects, such as ocean acidification, because SAI alone would not remove greenhouse gases from the atmosphere. On the geopolitical side, the technology's potential to alter weather patterns and benefit certain regions of the world at the expense of other regions could trigger sharp opposition by some nations. Others might seize on SAI's benefits and back away from their commitment to carbon dioxide reductions. And as with other breakthrough technologies, global norms and standards are lacking to guide the deployment and implementation of SAI and other geoengineering initiatives.
I mean, the cat is out of the bag, right? This is not conspiracy theory. These are facts. So you have to show your friends this video and tell them, here are the facts. Our own government is acknowledging that they're spraying the skies. We've known that they've been spraying the skies forever, and what they're spraying the skies with is affecting your health, the way your brain functions, the way your food grows, the way your water is. They're literally destroying the planet right in front of your face, all the while claiming that the car that you're driving is actually doing it. Y'all, we have got to wake up and stop this madness. We have to share the videos to everyone we know so we can help everyone wake up to this before it is too late. Here's some proof of more planes that they're putting in the air and what they're doing to our country.
Climate engineering is the crown jewel of the military-industrial complex. Climate engineering has been used to destabilize and topple nations all over the globe, facilitating military occupations by hostile countries like the U.S. We know that some of these countries are having their precipitation cut off because they have stated so on the floor of the UN, like the president of Iran stating emphatically that NATO weather modification programs were cutting off the precipitation to Iran, but U.S. media never covered it.
We have an economic model operating globally, which is operating based on covert force. And I have very serious questions after watching the financial patterns as to whether that financial force or that force includes weather warfare.
People were coming to me, telling me about this. So because of that, I went to the government in Ottawa under Freedom of Information. There was a 40-page report, of which half the pages were completely blank, and the other half had a lot of blank outs. But there was sufficient information to tell me that, yeah, they're aware. They call it geoengineering.
One of the big problems is that when we find some new technology, we get all excited by it, by the potential benefits of that technology, and often implement it and use the technology before we have any idea of the negative effects.
Shouldn't it be considered that every breath we take is laden with highly toxic particles that are wreaking havoc in our own bodies? Particles that aren't being reported by any air quality testing systems. Any official air quality testing are looking for PM10 or PM 2.5 microns at best. The climate engineering nanoparticulates are exponentially smaller. They go virtually unreported.
These nanomaterials generate reactive oxygen species in biological materials, damage tissue, lead to advanced aging, cause cancer, causative agents of dementia. So, yeah, we might think that we're doing something positive for humanity to save our species, but we're also poisoning ourselves.
And I say what they're doing to our country, this is on a global scale. All right, y'all, global scale. So we have to get involved. We have to start calling our representatives. We have to start bringing this out into the open. We have to stop accepting people telling us that it's not real. This is very, very, very real. And the consequences of messing with Earth is not going to be good, right? They're messing with everything natural. They're synthesizing food. They're synthesizing herbs to make medicine, okay? They're turning kids and getting them to cut their genitals off, okay? This is, y'all, this is a full court press on humanity by a handful of crazy rich people, all right? We have got to put our foot down on this, okay? I'm only bringing you these videos for your informational purposes, okay? This video and the videos that I post lately, okay, are to help y'all realize that we are literally in World War III right now. We are under attack psychologically, right? We are under attack, weather attacks, okay? We're being attacked by the environment, okay? They're attacking our food, our water, even your shelters. They're raising the interest rates where you can't even buy a house. They're taking the dream of home ownership, one of the pins of American society, and they're flushing it down the drain, and they're telling you that everyone is going to be renters and you will own nothing and be happy. You know, Einstein once said that the world will not be destroyed by evil people. The world will be destroyed by good men doing nothing, basically allowing it. All right, make sure you share this video. We're just trying to get the information out there, okay? To all the naysayers, please do your homework. Look into this stuff. It's happening real time. Trees are dying in the forests, just dying. A lot of people report on trees dying in the forest. A lot of this has to do with the chemicals that they're pounding us with.
So,
all right, guys.
We might think that we're...
All right, so please forgive the long clips, but I hope you see the importance of why I'm sharing these videos. Very well put together by Doug from Doug and Stacy's Off-Grid Living, right? And just he compiled a lot of those different news reports and the hearings and the different people talking about the topic, exposing it as conspirafact, right? And
I might make that a t-shirt.
Talked about
Conspirafact.
Conspirafact. That is a t-shirt right there.
I'm already making it.
So guys, we've talked about how they manipulate your mind to feel warm and cozy and hide the truths of how they're using our food, the medicine we have, and even the air we breathe to affect our health, our mental state, and it's all for the love of money or for the love of power or for the love of they just want to be a god and they want to play God, right? And so a final very important topic that we're going to be talking about today is one of the ways for them to implement control once people wake up to the truths of reality is through finances, through money. Because it doesn't matter how many conspiracies you're aware of, if you can't feed your family, you're still in a very bad position, and you'll probably bow to the system when it comes to, you know, feeding your family. And it's more effective than putting a gun to your head, taking food off of your table. And so the collapse of the modern economic system, the modern petrodollar system, is looming on the horizon. And this next video is going to share how many other countries across the world are banding together to create a new currency, and this will challenge the resolve of the petrodollar and could lead to the dollar's collapse. I don't know what the timetable is here, but it's something we need to be aware of. And so check out how the BRICS nations are forming a new currency.
While all the media here in America has been laser focused on the arrest and indictment of President Trump, well, it's worth mentioning that the rest of the world has not stopped spinning. And instead, many of our geopolitical rivals, they're taking this opportunity, this moment when America is, you can say, distracted, to make their moves. For instance, it turns out that the BRICS nations are working overtime to create a brand new currency of their own that will be pegged to physical assets, such as gold. Now, in case you've never heard of it before, BRICS is an organization similar to that of the G7. However, while the G7 is a group of more advanced and mature economies, BRICS is the organization for the leading emerging economies. At the moment, there are 5 member states: Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. Together, these 5 nations, they represent about 26% of the world's land surface area. They represent about 41% of the global population, and at this moment, they represent approximately 31.5% of the global GDP. And by the way, just as a fun fact, the BRICS nations, they recently overtook the G7 in terms of their collective GDP. At the moment, while BRICS represents 31.5% of the global GDP, as you can see from the graph up on your screen, the G7 represents only 30%. And according to that analysis, well, if things continue the way they're going, that gap will only get wider as time progresses. And these BRICS nations are right now making large moves to supplant the US dollar as the world's global reserve currency. For instance, just last week, you had a high-ranking Russian official who came out and confirmed what was rumored to be true for a long time, that the BRICS nations are indeed working to create a new global currency. Here's specifically what the deputy chairman of the Russian State Duma, meaning he is the Russian equivalent to our Kevin McCarthy, here's what he said regarding this new currency. Quote, "The transition to settlements in national currencies is the first step. We've already seen this occur with recent oil deals between India and Russia being settled in currencies other than dollars. The next step is to provide the circulation of digital or any other form of a fundamentally new currency in the nearest future. I think that at the BRICS Leaders Summit, the readiness to realize this project will be announced. Such works are underway. The BRICS nations are developing a strategy that does not defend the dollar or the euro, and that a single currency would likely emerge within BRICS, pegged to gold or other groups of products, such as rare earth elements or soil." Meaning that this group of nations, which represents, again, about 40% of the world's population and a growing portion of the global GDP, they are actively working on developing a new global currency that's tied to either gold and or some other types of physical assets in order to bypass the US dollar. And for your reference, the BRICS Leaders Summit that he mentioned in that statement, it'll be held in August over in South Africa. And this year's summit, well, it might be attended by more than just these 5 countries. That's because even though at this very moment, only the nations of Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa make up the BRICS bloc, other nations are beginning to apply as well. Last year, you had the nation of Iran officially apply to join BRICS. And according to a report that was put out by The Cradle, several other nations have also been expressing their interest in joining the BRICS bloc as well, including Saudi Arabia, Algeria, the United Arab Emirates, Egypt, Argentina, Mexico, as well as Nigeria. However, the fact that this particular group of nations is growing in size, growing in GDP, and are getting ready to launch their own currency, well, these are not the only pieces of bad news for US dollar hegemony. Instead, this is just the latest in a long trend of, I guess, what you can call global de-dollarization. For instance, late last week, the leaders of China and Brazil, they jointly announced a new trade agreement wherein they will buy and sell from each other using their own national currencies and completely circumvent the US dollar. Under this new deal, Brazil and China will carry out trade by directly exchanging the Chinese RMB with Brazilian reals, or vice versa. There will no longer be this intermediary step of converting their local currencies into US dollars, even in the case of oil transactions. Here was a quote from Senator Marco Rubio. He was on Fox News just yesterday talking about this decision by Brazil to ditch the petrodollar and move on over to direct trade with China. Take a listen.
Today, Brazil, in our hemisphere, largest country in the Western Hemisphere south of us, cut a trade deal with China. They're going to, from now on, do trade in their own currencies, get right around the dollar. They're creating a secondary economy in the world, totally independent of the United States. We won't have to talk about sanctions in 5 years because there'll be so many countries transacting in currencies other than the dollar that we won't have the ability to sanction them. As we are sitting here, focused on some of these nuttiness that's going on, people that are basically dedicating their lives in this country to ensuring that it is legal to mutilate children, to do drag shows in schools. They dedicate their lives to this, and we have another superpower that basically wants to become the world's dominant power at our expense, and these people don't want to focus on it.
However, this is not only happening in Brazil, and instead, this ditching of the petrodollar appears to be a growing trend, a trend that's catching on around the world. For instance, at the Russia-China summit that was held last week, Vladimir Putin put out this statement, quote, "We, meaning Russia, are in favor of using the Chinese yuan for settlements between Russia and the countries of Asia, Africa, and Latin America." For your reference, it's already been the case ever since the beginning of the Russia-Ukraine proxy war that China has been purchasing Russian oil using both Russian rubles as well as Chinese yuan. Meanwhile, last week you saw a French company buying 65,000 tons of liquefied natural gas from the United Arab Emirates, and for the first time ever, this French company paid for that gas in Chinese currency. This was the first time that such a thing has happened. France bought liquefied natural gas, it was shipped to them on a tanker from the UAE, and they settled the account on the Shanghai Petroleum and National Gas Exchange using, again, not US dollars, but Chinese yuan. Then you have the case of Saudi Arabia, which has not only been moving closer and closer to China, such as by joining the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, but also the government of Saudi Arabia has been expressing more and more willingness to accept local currencies in exchange for their oil. And along that line, just 2 weeks ago, the Saudi government, they agreed to accept Kenyan shillings as a payment for their oil shipments over to Kenya, again, instead of US dollars. Then you had the government of India. They recently came out and they offered the use of their currency, meaning the Indian rupee, as an alternative to the US dollar for international transactions. Here's a short excerpt from Bloomberg reporting on this exact case. Quote, "India will offer its currency as an alternative for trade to countries that are facing a shortage of dollars in the wake of the sharpest tightening in monetary policy by the US Federal Reserve in decades." Then, along that very same line, just last week, you had a meeting over in Indonesia where the finance ministers of almost every nation in Southeast Asia were in attendance. And at the very top of the agenda for this particular gathering, well, they were discussing ways to, quote, "reduce dependence on the US dollar, the euro, the yen, and the British pound from financial transactions and move to settlements in local currencies." The meeting discussed efforts to reduce dependence on major currencies through the local currency transaction scheme. This is an extension of the previous local currency settlement scheme that has already begun to be implemented between ASEAN members. ASEAN is, of course, the Association of Southeast Asian Nations. And so, whether it's the BRICS nations creating their own global currency that's backed by gold, or whether it's these individual nations choosing to transact in their own local currencies, what's becoming clear is that more and more countries are trying to minimize their exposure to the US dollar.
All right, so obviously the summary here is that the dollar is going to be very quickly challenged by these BRICS nations that are coming together, creating an alternative currency, while the United States has had precedence in kind of being able to bully people through sanctions and such. These other countries are going to be able to get out from under that with their new currency, and this will greatly destabilize the American dollar. And with all the banks collapsing in recent days, these are all warning signs that we need to be paying attention to. And you know, I share all these stories with this in mind, that right now on the mainstream news docket, the main thing they're talking about is the Trump indictment and Bud Light being canceled. Right?
Yeah.
And yet the skies are being seeded with poisons, and the plants are being turned into abominations, and AI is just around the corner of being able to mimic anybody, and yet we're talking about Bud Light being canceled and Trump being indicted. You know, that's what
look
they're
over here.
repeating.
Look over here while we do this. Now it's time for a word from our good friend JJ. Now a word from our sponsor. Now personally, I've tried every CBD product on the market to help me manage my pain. I have degenerative disc disease, and nothing has ever helped me until I tried JJ's Natural CBD Rub. So when I found out that we had the opportunity to work together, I was so excited that I could share this amazing product with you guys here on Skiba News Nation. So if you want to manage your pain like I did, text CBD to 920-382-7720 for an exclusive $50 off a 3-pack special. Also, check out all the testimonials on their website, jjcbdrub.com. Get pain relief like I did by getting yourself some JJ's Natural CBD Rub today. Check out more info down in the description below. Thank you as always, JJ. Well, think it's about that time. It's about that time for an all-new Opa's Corner. Take it away, Opa.
Mein Hut, der hat 3 Ecken. 3 Ecken hat mein Hut. Und hat nicht 3 Ecken, dann ist es nicht mein Hut.
Now it's time for Opa's Corner. Let's get started right away. A blonde goes into work one morning, crying her eyes out. Her boss asked sympathetically, "What's the matter?" The blonde replies, "Early this morning I got a phone call saying that my mother passed away." The boss, feeling sorry for her, says, "Why don't you go home for the day, take the day off, and relax and rest?" "Thanks, but I'm better off here. I need to keep my mind off of it, and I have a better chance of doing that here." The boss agrees and allows the blonde to work as usual. A couple of hours pass, and the boss decides to check on the blonde. He looks out from his office and sees the blonde crying hysterically. "What's so bad now? Are you going to be okay?" he asks. "No," explains the blonde. "I just received a horrible call from my sister. Her mother died too."
That's dark.
3 dinosaurs stumbled across a magic lamp. They rubbed it, and a genie appeared. "I have 3 wishes, so I'll give 1 to each of you," the genie announces. The first dinosaur thinks hard. "All right," he says, "I'll have a big, juicy piece of meat." Instantly, the biggest, juiciest piece of meat he'd ever seen appears in front of him. Not to be outdone, the second dinosaur thinks even harder. "I know. I'll have a shower of meat." Immediately, huge pieces of meat rain down around him. The third dinosaur, certainly not to be outdone, thinks harder than the previous dinosaurs. "I've got it," he cries. "I want a meteor shower." A woman has twin boys and gives them up for adoption. The first goes to a family in Egypt, which names him Amal. The second goes to a family in Spain, which names him Juan. Years later, Juan sends a picture of himself to his birth mother. Excited at receiving the picture, she tells her husband that she wishes she also had a picture of Amal. Her husband responds, "They're twins. If you've seen Juan, you've seen Amal." A wife asks her husband who his favorite vampire is. He replied, "The one from Sesame Street." She says, "He doesn't count." He replied, "Oh, I assure you he does." A man just finishes his LASIK eye surgery, and his surgeon leads him in his office to discuss the surgery. "So, would you like to have the good news or the bad news first?" the surgeon says. The man excitedly replies, "I'll take the good news first." The surgeon says, "Well, you're about to get a new dog." 2 engineers were standing at the base of a flagpole looking at its top. A blonde walked by and asked what they were doing. "We're supposed to find the height of this flagpole," said Sven, "but we don't have a ladder." The woman took a wrench from her purse, loosened a couple of bolts, and laid the pole down on the ground. Then she took a tape measure from her handbag, took a measurement, and announced, 21 feet 6 inches. and walked away. One engineer shook his head and laughed. Typical blonde. We ask for the height and she gives us the length. A fly feels a bug on its back. Hey, bug on my back. Are you a mite? Asks the fly. I might be, giggles the mite. That's the worst pun I've ever heard, groans the fly. What do you expect, said the mite. I came up with it on a fly. A son asks his father, I feel like you're always making up rules and stuff. Like what? Like if I don't clean my room, a portal will open up and take me to another dimension. Well, that's what happened to your older brother. What older brother? Exactly. And now for the funnies. Man, I hate elevator music. Creative writing. Remember, your first sentence needs to grab the reader's attention. The human opened a can of tuna. Again, why is it that the revolution always gets this far and then everyone just chickens out? I don't mean to sound judgmental, but that's one ugly bird.
It's a Terminator bird.
You think I'm going to be the breadwinner while you just loaf all day? You aren't the only slice of toast in the world, Melba. Mother warned me not to marry a sourdough. Yes, I received your paperwork. My assistant Ed is on it right now. She called me her emotional support cat. I can't handle this kind of pressure, Jessica. Yeah, you are in way over your head. Bud's Cartoon Repair. Thanks for coming. Something's wrong. Everything seems a little too quiet and normal today. This is the medicine for Spunky's condition. And this is the medicine for your condition once you try giving Spunky his medicine. Not much. Just chilling with my peeps. I just booked us this gig on Fort Myers Beach. They need someone to come down and rid the beach of all the spring breakers. She may have said nothing's wrong, but what did her tail look like? I really didn't notice her. Damn it, Steve! You have to look for the puffy tail. Bad cat! Stop putting Rusty's water bowl in the freezer. They'll never stop trying to find us, you know. Today's film is on the gingerbread reproductive system. If I hear any giggling, I'll turn the projector off. Well, the sloth nailed him. You know old Hank never was exactly a quick draw. Just because it's a box doesn't mean you have to sit. I've got a problem, Clarence. Egg dyeing contest. Well, hell no, I can't tell Harriet. First thing she's going to ask me is, what was I doing checking out a decoy? Hey man, I just stabbed a thumb in a sewing incident and I need to lay low for a while. Can you help me out? Sure. I know of a haystack on the edge of town where you'll be safe until the heat dies down. Look, Tom, I'm a passenger pigeon. You're a carrier pigeon. I don't make the rules. It helps me reach my goals. Today, I sat on the floor, the counter, a chair, a keyboard, 2 laps, and a term paper. I need to get a sit bit. I'm usually a basket case this time of year. Go on, I'm all ears. There you go again. Every time the bears fight, you're right there. Sure. The place you're looking for is straight over them hills. Of course, that's as the crow flies, not as the chicken walks. Great Scott, Professor! If our calculations are correct, the song was right. All we are is dust in the wind. Who would dump out my delivery and steal the box? Pay or I play. I'll huff and I'll puff and I'll buy a controlling interest in your company as part of a hostile takeover bid. 3 Pigs Home Builders, Inc. I can't even imagine the self-control required to work at a bubble wrap factory. And this concludes another Opa's Corner.
Mein Hut, der hat 3 Ecken. 3 Ecken hat mein Hut. Und hat nicht 3 Ecken, dann ist es nicht mein Hut.
Opa's Corner is now available on my own YouTube channel. Like, share, and subscribe.
Thank you, Opa, for another great Opa's Corner. I love the cat ones as always, and like that guy said from last week, you're not fired, I promise. Anyways, it's time for some mystery. So this week for history, we're going to be talking about this man right here, Charles Manson. Now, a lot of you may think of Charles Manson as like a serial killer or a crazy cult leader, but what if I told you he wasn't any of those? Like, what if I told you that Charles Manson's story goes a lot deeper than the official story? What if I told you that Charles Manson didn't kill anybody and wasn't at the scene of the crime, at any of those crimes that he was convicted of? And what if I told you that Charles Manson was a product of MK Ultra? Well, that's what I'm going to be trying to present here in this first clip, so check this out.
The original story goes that Manson believed that there was going to be a race war.
He wanted to incite this race war because he had convinced his followers that through messages he received from the Beatles' White Album, from their lyrics, from biblical Old Testament prophecies, that he had been told that he was going to be the savior of the world. And once the race war started, he would hide his family in a bottomless pit in the desert, and when the race war ended with the blacks winning, the blacks would be framed for murders. The Manson family would emerge and repopulate the planet with their perfect offspring and dominate.
Is reminiscent of a weird religious rite. 5 persons, including actress Sharon Tate, were found dead at the home of Miss Tate and her husband, screen director Roman Polanski.
Were damaged by the CIA tell their stories publicly for the first time. They believe they were part of a CIA project called MK Ultra.
Here's a flashback that no one really expected. Imagine your mother on an acid trip. I'm talking June Cleaver on LSD.
Everything is in color, and I can feel the air. I can see it. I can see all the molecules. There's a revolution. We'll be here.
When do you expect this revolution?
Soon.
Did you expect this verdict?
The revolution.
What do you mean by a revolution?
A bloody revolution.
Are you saying? I question his, huh? Are you saying? Sane? Yes. That's relative.
Manson and his killer cult, the JFK assassination, MK Ultra, Jack Ruby, LSD, and other CIA projects.
Maybe I should have killed 400 or 500 people, then I would have felt better. Then when I felt like I really offered society something.
Like most people in his profile, Charlie didn't have a great childhood. He had an absent father and had a mother that was in and out of prison. Manson never had a stable home and spent a lot of his time getting into trouble.
Charlie Manson was basically just sort of a 2-bit criminal who had spent most of his life inside the system.
When he was released about age 32 and 67, all federal institutions too, which was interesting.
This was one of the first strange things about the Manson story. The amount of times he broke parole, got into trouble, should have landed him many more years in prison. Yet, for some reason, he kept getting out.
And they allowed Charles Manson over and over and over again to get out of jail.
A real turning point in my reporting was after I got access to Manson's parole file, this record, a pretty substantial record, I took it to someone named Louis Wachneck, who was a retired judge. I brought the documents to him, we laid them all out, and he's looking at all the documents, and he's seeing this pattern of catch, release, and he's going, he should have gone back the first time they wanted him out. He said he was more important to somebody out than in.
Around this time, where Charlie created the family, he used his charm to gather a group, mostly of young women who were seen as free-spirited hippies, and a few men who idolized his so-called forward thinking.
He was like Christ, and he had the answers.
The trial that had occurred, that had been prosecuted by Vincent Bugliosi, had a lot of malfeasance in it by the prosecution. They planted a former prosecutor on the defense team to sabotage the defense. 2 or 3 of the principal witnesses, including Terry Melcher, who played a big part in this, lied on the stand. You commit perjury in a murder trial, you could get a murder sentence too because of that. So there was about a dozen of those.
So if you committed perjury during a murder trial, you could be sentenced for murder for the same amount of time that someone would get sentenced if they murdered somebody.
You are subject to an actual capital. You could be sent to the chair. The 5 people who were convicted of murder in the first trial, had I been around and able to prove this in the early 70s, Vincent Bugliosi and the 3 people who lied on the stand in a material way, in a very important way, they all could have been tried for that perjury or given the same sentence that the people who had gotten the death sentence.
There was some sort of a CIA program where they infiltrated these hippie communities and they allowed Charles Manson over and over and over again to get out of jail.
Yeah.
They knew that he was committing all these crimes.
We have to be careful when we say they.
Who's they?
Yeah, we have to break it all down. One of the other things I found out that was very significant was that Manson had a parole officer, his first parole officer, who kind of had given him a get-out-of-jail-free card for the first year after Manson was released from prison.
Smith?
Roger Smith, yeah. And he was a criminologist in the Bay Area. Manson violated his parole the day that he was released in Los Angeles. You'd think it's a little lie, but it's an important lie that Vince Bugliosi presented, not just at trial, but also in his book. At trial, it's much more serious. He changed the narrative. He said Manson had been given permission to travel to San Francisco from L.A.
So remember San Francisco.
Manson hadn't been given that permission. He just showed up there. They originally were going to violate him, sent him right back to prison. Someone stepped in and took care of that and let Manson stay in San Francisco, and he was assigned to Roger Smith. Through a Freedom of Information Act process, I got his federal parole file. And those were the kind of seeds of how I found out that Manson had this immunity from prosecution for the 2 years he was out of prison from '67 until the murders occurred in the summer of '69.
Who was Smith doing this for? Who was giving him the instructions to continue to let Manson out and to continue to monitor him?
Well, that's the problem. I didn't get the whole file, and the file I got had redactions. He would report to the head office, and they would give him instructions, and then he would violate those instructions, and there'd be no repercussions for him or for Manson. For instance, Manson was arrested in July of 1967, 3 or 4 months after he got out of prison, when he was under Roger Smith's supervision, for interfering with an officer who was trying to arrest one of his first young followers. He was put in jail, pled out, so he got a 3-day sentence, a new probation sentence as well, and all that was hidden. It's not in Bugliosi's book. The parole officer, Roger Smith, a week later wrote to the head office that Manson was doing fine, and he actually recommended that Manson be allowed to go to Mexico and work in Mexico. And the head parole office in the United States, since it's federal, wrote back and they said, that's insane.
So I fell down the deepest, darkest rabbit hole with Charles Manson and everything that had to do with Charlie Manson. Now, what if I told you, Jake, that Charlie Manson was a Beach Boy? Would you believe me? Would you believe me?
Wow, no, yeah, no, I've never heard that.
Well, Opa, can you pull up that picture? This is on the left, Dennis Wilson, and that's Charles Manson on the right. And so there's a lot of ties that have to do with the last clip I just showed with the prosecutor, and they totally framed him, and it's my belief that Charlie Manson was a product of MK Ultra. So that's what I'm going to show you in this next clip, his relationship with the Beach Boys.
I'm sure most of you are aware of who Charles Manson is and those gruesome murders, but some of you may not know he released his debut album while in jail in March of 1970. But what's even crazier to me is that there exists a whole other album that he recorded with the Beach Boys at Brian Wilson's home studio, and this has yet to see the light of day. Information on this lost album is very scarce. For obvious reasons, most people in or connected to the Beach Boys want to distance themselves from the whole affair.
Charlie wanted to be a rock star. He wrote songs with my cousin Dennis, and when things didn't work out, then he, full of rage, he wanted to kill some people. He tied it to something he called Helter Skelter, which was going to be a race war.
Which was made up by the prosecution.
Wacky to start it. I mean, it was weird.
What we do know is that Charles Manson got involved with the Beach Boys through their drummer, Dennis Wilson. Now, there are several accounts of how they first met. One involves Dennis getting picked up by an associate of Charles while hitchhiking, and yet Charles himself stated that he first met Dennis in San Francisco. However, the most likely story is that one day in April of 1968, Dennis picked up 2 women hitchhiking, and he brought them back to his newly rented home at 14400 Sunset Boulevard. For Dennis, he was always the most reckless and adventurous member of the Beach Boys, and being newly divorced, it was often the case he would bring home young women. However, this time, something was different. The women told Dennis about Charles Manson, describing him as a musician, poet, and leader of their group, later known as the Family. At some point, Dennis left the women at the house and he went to Brian Wilson's house for a recording session. When he came back to his house around 3 in the morning, he found it full of people, and this is most likely when Dennis first met Charles. He was drawn to Charles's charismatic personality and his reputation as a folk singer and songwriter. A friendship soon developed between the two men that was mutually beneficial. Manson was eager to use Dennis's connections to further his music career, and Dennis took full advantage of Manson's ability to bring young women to the house and partake in the psychedelic drug-fueled sex ways. Soon after meeting, Charles and roughly 24 members of his family took up residence at Dennis's home for about 5 months. During that time, the family exploited Dennis's hospitality, running errands in his cars, eating his food, selling or giving away his possessions, wearing his clothes, having wild parties, and Dennis seemed to enjoy it all, at least for a time. Dennis felt a lot of guilt over becoming rich at such a young age, to the point where he actively gave away a lot of his money to his friends, and so I think it's safe to say he probably enjoyed sharing his wealth with Charles and his followers. In 1971, an anonymous member of the Beachboys told Rolling Stone magazine, "I suppose the lifestyle appealed to him. Dennis ran up the largest bill in history the time the whole family got the." Dennis's mother, Audrey Wilson, said, "They were just hippies, and he, Dennis, thought Manson was the nicest person, a very gentle, nice guy. I did think they were a bunch of leeches." After the release of Pet Sounds in 1966, the Beach Boys' creative driving force, Brian Wilson, started to experience a period of emotional stress and erratic behavior. His songwriting output slowed significantly, and by the summer of 1968, Brian found himself in a psychiatric hospital seeking treatment.
The Beach Boys had a serious bout with drugs and was diagnosed as schizophrenic, staying in bed for 4 years in the early 70s.
As talented as Brian is, as much as I admire him, I really don't think he likes to be in the limelight. I don't think so at all. I just don't think so. I think now, at this point in his life, he'll probably do anything to stay out of it.
Dennis, however, loved the limelight. He was a natural ham, just wanting to please people, off stage as well as on.
Hi, my name is Dennis Wilson. I make rock and roll records.
There was a magnetism about him, charisma. He was unpretentious, charming, and had a heart of gold.
From all accounts, Dennis was very gentle and unpretentious, but he was also defiant and undisciplined, constantly hunting for pleasure but never finding happiness.
On top of this, their popularity as a band had reached its lowest level, and they were generally seen as uncool. They were also facing mounting debt, and they had a fast approaching deadline of delivering one last album to fulfill their contract with Capitol Records. So with Brian out of the picture, the rest of the band were stuck picking up the reins, either by finishing songs Brian started or writing new songs themselves. Dennis was a gifted songwriter. However, he struggled with writing lyrics, but this was something that Charles had a gift for. Neil Young said, "Manson would sing a song and just make it up as he went along for 3 or 4 minutes, and he would never repeat one word, and it all made perfect sense, and it shook you up to listen to it. It was so good that it scared you. He had this kind of music that nobody else was doing. I thought he really had something crazy, something great. He was like a living poet." Dennis admired Charles's musical talent and wanted to help him be heard, and so sometime during the summer of '68, Dennis arranged for Charles to start recording some of his songs at Brian Wilson's home studio. According to Charles, he recorded about 10 songs, and they were very well produced, with some members of the Beach Boys playing on the tracks and some of his female followers singing backup vocals. Around 100 hours were put on tape with about 6 to 8 songs recorded. Some of the material was pretty good. He had musical talent. Now, we don't know what songs were recorded, but we can assume that they were probably a lot of the same songs that appeared on Charles's debut. Dennis told a UK magazine, "The wizard is Charles Manson, who is another friend of mine. He sings, plays, and writes poetry, and may be another artist for Brother Records." Now, Brother Records was the newly formed record label created by the Beach Boys in order to give themselves total creative control over their music. Each member was encouraged to bring talent they discovered and record them. Also, during this time, Charles wrote the song "Cease to Exist" as a way to heal the differences the Beach Boys were experiencing at this time. The band bought the song, paying Charles some amount of cash along with a motorcycle. When asked why the band didn't give Charles songwriting credit, Dennis said he didn't want that. He wanted money instead. "I gave him about $100,000 worth of stuff." Once they bought the the song, Dennis changed some of the lyrics and retitled it Never Learn Not to Love. The band then recorded it in their signature style and released it in December as a B-side to the single Bluebirds Over the Mountain. This angered Charles, though, as he felt if they hadn't have changed his lyrics, the song would have been a hit. Terry Melcher, son of Doris Day and producer of some of the bigger hits by the Byrds. Terry thought Charles had some talent, but not enough to help him get a recording contract with a major label, but he was interested in recording his music and possibly making a documentary on Charles and the family. Gradually, Dennis grew tired of the endless party at his Sunset Boulevard home, and since his lease was set to expire at the beginning of September, he moved out to a beach house a month early in August of 1968. He didn't exactly let Charles know what was going on and left it up to the Beach Boys manager to evict everyone still living there.
So notice that they keep saying San Francisco, which is interesting because the place where it's now been discovered that, you know, MK Ultra and Charlie Manson was a part of MK Ultra was, in fact, San Francisco. Like Charlie Manson knew a lot of famous musicians like Neil Young, and he probably knew Jim Morrison and all the people from Laurel Canyon. Now, Jake, what is the drug they used for MK Ultra experiments? Do you know?
Ooh, it would be
the main one.
Lysergic ditryptamine acid. I don't know. Is that LSD? Right?
LSD, right. So keep that in mind because I'll come back to that. Now, if YouTube doesn't copyright strike this video I'm going to show you next, I would like to play a clip of the song Cease to Exist, which is Charles Manson's song, and then the Beach Boys one. But before that, I'm going to explain my two big theories that I've never seen anywhere on YouTube of Charles Manson, LSD, and like just the darkness surrounding his case, the darkness surrounding, you know, how he could have been framed. So check this out. Now, as I was creating this Charles Manson Beach Boys video, I thought to myself, being a huge Beach Boys fan, isn't it ironic that Brian Wilson, the genius mind behind the Beach Boys, developed mental illness after one bad LSD trip? And then you think, what did MK Ultra use on its victims? LSD. So was Charles Manson trying to infiltrate the Beach Boys? It kind of makes you think, huh? Well, that's not the craziest of my theories, but we'll be talking about that here in a little bit. Now, what I'm about to play is a clip of Charles Manson's music, and personally, I think it's actually pretty good, but I'll let you guys be the judge of that. And I'm actually curious what you guys actually think, so leave me a comment below and let me know if you like him or not.
Pretty girl, pretty girl. Cease to exist, just come and say you love me. Give up your world. Come on, you can't be.
Now that was Charles Manson's version. Here's Dennis Wilson and the Beach Boys version. Now I must say I'm a Beach Boys fan. I'm a big fan of their music. But their album is called 2020, people. What does 2020 and Helter Skelter, aka the race war, have to do with each other? Does it sound familiar?
Hands up, don't shoot! Hands up, don't shoot!
Did Charles Manson have inside knowledge on what the government was planning to do in this day and age with the media? Or maybe I'm just crazy.
The 3rd precinct of the Minneapolis Police Department on fire. Nearby businesses ablaze. This is how the night of May 28th unfolded. George Floyd's arrest and death in police custody on Monday set off protests in the Twin Cities. The protesters are demanding that criminal charges be brought against the officers involved.
Put their fists up! Yeah! We all here! All lives matter!
When that didn't happen on Thursday, some demonstrators escalated their tactics, while others tried to keep the peace.
Stop doing stuff!
Now, suspiciously, well, I say suspiciously, Dennis Wilson's cause of death, he had just divorced his wife. There was a yacht that they both shared, and when they would fight on the boat, he would throw stuff out the window of the boat into the water. So when he died, he was very depressed. His wife had left him, and what he was doing was he was diving into the marina, I believe is what you call it, I don't know. But he was diving in the water, and he was swimming to the bottom and collecting the things that he had thrown out prior. And then, this is what the official story is, that he bumped his head on a dock, like on one of those wooden docks, and drowned. But he was found in the fetal position, which maybe I should do a whole other history segment on that, because it's super weird and interesting. But what are your thoughts, Jake?
Oh man, yeah, it's so interesting how they seem to cover up the connection between this guy and the music he influenced. You know, maybe just because he was so I don't know,
he was charismatic,
blacklisted,
yeah,
charismatic or something. Maybe they just didn't want people associating the tie. But it's just I'm just really interested you're bringing this out, man. This is music history.
Yeah, and I mean, like, the Beach Boys, like this album right here, this is called Pet Sounds. This is by far my favorite album, and I've listened to a lot of albums, but in my opinion, this is the most perfect album in the world. Everything about it is it's like nothing. I can't even explain it, but it's my favorite record of all time. And if you haven't listened to it, check it out. I mean, I don't know if there are any subliminal messages in there or anything, but I don't know. It's just cool how they brought they influenced Sgt. Pepper and music after that with Pet Sounds. Paul McCartney, and they say he's dead, but it's the same Paul McCartney. But Paul McCartney said that Sgt. Pepper and their later music was inspired by Pet Sounds by the Beach Boys. So I always thought that was pretty interesting, and music history is very interesting in my opinion, because I'm a musician, you're a musician, and maybe a lot of people that are watching are musicians, who knows. So I hope you guys enjoyed this week's history segment. If you like the Charles Manson thing, or if you want me to cover Dennis Wilson again, leave me a comment, let me know, and then I'll do it. So that's all I got. I hope you guys enjoyed. All right, well, thank you, Jake, for another great current news and memes. Opa, thank you for another great Opus Corner, and we hope you enjoyed today's episode. Thank you guys for being here every week and for coming on this journey with us as we continue to stay on the quest for truth. Subscribe and stay tuned. If you would like to submit a story, topic, or have any other inquiries, please email submit@skibanewsnation.com. Also, you can email Jeremiah Skiba personally at jeremiah@skibanewsnation.com. Also, email Jake personally at jake@skibanewsnation.com. If you want to write us a letter, send us something, help support us, or just say hi, please send your letter to Jeremiah Skiba, P.O. Box 560-271, The Colony, Texas 75056. If you write us a letter, I'll do my best to write you back. Hey, Skiba News Nation family, thank you for watching. Please like, share, subscribe, and click that notification bell so you never miss an episode of Skiba News Nation. If you want to help support us, please consider becoming a Patreon, where you will get exclusive content, shoutouts, and much more. And you can also support our channel by getting yourself some new Skiba News Nation merch. Thank you for coming on this journey with us as we continue to stay on the quest for truth. Huge shout out to all our Patreon supporters. Thank you so much for your support. We couldn't do this show without you. If you want to help support us, go to patreon.com/Skiba News Nation. Also, you can listen to Skiba News Nation podcast on your favorite podcast platform.